Chapter 989. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and god of war doppelganger stood calmly above the radiant world of yin and yang life and death formation, while Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger, Sha Luoxian, and Jian Songtian stood behind Lin Feng. In the distance, opposite the yin and yang life and death formation stood Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist. Taishu Temple shrank into a light spot and hid in one of Shoichi Daishin's pupils. Under the premise of not fighting, Shoichi Daishin's primordial spirit could nourish Taishu Temple so that it would not disintegrate. Under the nourishment of Shoichi Daishin's Dharma power, Taishu Temple could be put into another battle until it reached its limit or was damaged. Only then would it be divided into the void yin-yang bell and the supreme formation breaking drum. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist silently looked at the yin and yang life and death formation in front of them. On the two sides of Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, on one side was the Gate of the Sea of Stars, and on the other side was Ding of Shenzhou, which had revealed its true form. Silently, the two treasures floated in the Sea of Stars. Lin Feng glanced at Ding of Shenzhou. It was a huge square cauldron with 4 legs. It seemed to be made of bronze, and its body was engraved with fine patterns. Looking carefully, Lin Feng could find Kunlun Mountain, the Yangtze River, the Great Hengduan Mountain Range, the Southern Wasteland Mountains, the vast sea in the east, and the glaciers and snowfields in the north. The vast world of the Divine Land, the thousands of sceneries, the mountains, and the geography seemed to be found on this bronze cauldron. From this cauldron, one could clearly feel the majestic and heavy feeling of the entire Divine Land and the human tribe world. The inscriptions and ravines on the cauldron were like the real mountains, rivers, valleys, and plains of the Divine Land. It was as if there were no mistakes at all. Lin Feng could even vaguely see that the inscriptions on the cauldron were actually changing constantly, corresponding to the geographical environment that was undergoing subtle or drastic changes all the time in the Divine Land of the real sector. Xia Huang's Ding of Shenzhou is indeed extraordinary. Lin Feng nodded repeatedly. At his current level, his perspective and train of thought were already different from ordinary people. In Lin Feng's opinion, the most valuable treasure among the 9 treasures of the ancient heavenly gates was the divine flame cauldron, and not the heavenly jade, which was the strongest in terms of magical powers. By the same logic, among the treasures of creation forged by the previous human emperors, the Grand Emperor's first imperial palace was the strongest in the past. Now the immortal dragon city that originated from the first emperor was completely built, and it was continuously strengthened with the help of Lin Feng. It was still difficult to say who was the strongest in terms of magical powers among the Dharma treasures of creation refined by the previous human emperors. The king of the underworld's Book of Life and Death also had the potential to improve. However, in Lin Feng's opinion, among the Dharma treasures of creation forged by the previous human emperors, the most valuable Dharma treasure was not the Dharma treasure that was sharp in terms of magical powers, but the seemingly ordinary Ding of Shenzhou. In fact, in the eyes of the Taishu Temple, the great Qin dynasty that controlled the immortal dragon city, the great Zhou dynasty that controlled the Grand Emperor's first imperial palace, and even the king of the underworld who controlled the Book of Life and Death, the value of the Ding of Shenzhou was extremely high. One could not simply look at its power in battles. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist were also constantly communicating with each other. "Martial uncle, can we bring forward the plan?" Xianlin Taoist asked via voice transmission. "The current situation in the desolate ancient Star Sea is also a good opportunity." Shoichi Daishin shook his head slightly. "Xianlin, don't be impatient." Xianlin Taoist fell silent for a moment before saying slowly, "I'm being impatient. The opportunity is good, but we can't control the situation here." At the same time, the master of the celestial sect is still in a situation where he can advance or retreat. The Tenrya Gen won't be lured out of the Xianhai Sea so easily. However, based on the feedback from Infinite Wasteland, the Tenrya Gen's recovery time is likely to be shorter than the 20 years that Martial Uncle Tai predicted. Shoichi Daishin said calmly, "We need an opportunity." Dao Master Xianlin nodded. He glanced at the Gate of the Sea of Stars and the Divine Land Cauldron and said in a low voice, "The situation in front of us is really unexpected. The master of the celestial sect actually controls a Gate of the Sea of Stars." Ding of Shenzhou, which has disappeared without a trace since ancient times, is actually hiding in the star sea and has also appeared at this time. Xianlin Taoist's gaze froze slightly. No, all of this is not a coincidence. I'm afraid it has something to do with Xianmen Tianzong. The clues that the Celestial Pool sect found back then are real, and these clues fell into the hands of the master of the Celestial sect, which is why this happened today. Shoichi Dashin also looked at Ding of Shenzhou. This treasure has a far-reaching impact. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone stared at the Star Sea Gate, and the God of War clone also looked at Ding of Shenzhou. In the current environment of the Divine Land, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were on par. The situation was rather delicate. The final ownership of this creation-grade treasure would have a much greater impact in the long run than in the short run. It was not the only deciding factor, but it was one of the deciding factors. Shoichi Dashin could foresee this, and so could Lin Feng. This was because this magic treasure had a deep impact on the development of the foundation of the sect's younger disciples. This was the first alchemy magic treasure in the history of the Tianyuan Great World. It was even better than the Taishu Temple's Sun-Moon Divine Furnace, the ancient Heaven Gate's Flaming Heavenly Divine Furnace, and other magic treasures. A huge amount of medicinal pills and resources could not create a top expert. Every top expert was created by a combination of various innate talents and postnatal opportunities, different experiences, and finally, through a path that ordinary people could not replicate, they would step onto a peak that ordinary people could not reach. There were enough bricks and tiles, but there were too many factors affecting whether it would be a magnificent palace or a vast brick kiln. However, it was undeniable that there were enough bricks and tiles. At the very least, it was one of the basic conditions for building a hall. A huge amount of resources could not create a top expert, but it could create a large number of outstanding talents in the middle and lower levels. At the very least, it would greatly expand this level, and it would allow the outstanding talents to develop more smoothly and save more time. The number of outstanding talents in the middle and lower levels would increase. Even if there was no increase in the probability, the number of powerful experts that would eventually emerge would still increase. The Taishu Temple in the past, the ancient Heaven Gate in the last years of the ancient era, and the primordial Devil sect, the number one holy land of the Devil Path in the history of the Divine Land, were all like this. When Xia Huang had forged this cauldron, he had considered this aspect. Unfortunately, his ambition was not fulfilled. Ding of Shenzhou had not been refined for long, and had only shown its edge for the first time. Xia Huang had mysteriously perished in the war between the two realms, and even Ding of Shenzhou had disappeared. Now that this treasure had finally appeared, Lin Feng and Shoichi Dashin were naturally eyeing it covetously. The same principle applied to the Gate of the Sea of Stars. Controlling a stable passage into the Sea of Stars also meant a huge amount of resources, material resources, starlight baptism, and so on. Lin Feng and Shoichi Dashin faced each other in the void of the Sea of Stars. They did not speak to each other. Their gazes shifted between the Gate of the Sea of Stars and Ding of Shenzhou, and finally landed on Ding of Shenzhou. Just now, they had all seen the waves caused by the Great Sage. They had also seen Zhu Yi and the others enter the little Kelowna world that Ding of Shenzhou had manifested together with the cultivators of the Taishu Temple led by Kai Fengzhou. Now that Ding of Shenzhou had revealed its original form, Zhu Yi and the others had naturally landed inside Ding of Shenzhou. Not only had people entered, but even the raging waves of the Sea of Stars had also surged in through the original domain passage, stirring up a storm in the little Kelowna world. It was also because of this that Ding of Shenzhou had revealed its body. In fact, the interior of Ding of Shenzhou was still quite chaotic at the moment. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone was protecting his fellow disciples. In front of them, there was a wild flow of starlight. The world seemed to be spinning non-stop, and it was completely impossible to distinguish up from down. Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, Luo Qinggu, and the others were under the protection of Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone. They looked at the chaotic world outside and shook their heads. Fortunately, it only caused the spiritual qi to be chaotic, and did not anger Ding of Shenzhou itself. The starlight flow was gradually calming down, but from time to time, there would be a sudden burst of violent waves, which made Zhu Yi's heart tremble. Unless there is the golden Permitha bridge, it will not be easy for my main body to come here and face these violent waves directly. Even if I am not in danger, I am afraid that I will not be able to protect my junior brothers and sisters under the shock of the magical power. Fortunately, these violent waves were only rising in a certain area, and did not affect the entire inner world of Ding of Shenzhou. Therefore, Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone could still protect Xianmen Tianzong and the others. He moved carefully in the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou, looking for a place where the starlight flow was weak and calm. After staring at the starlight flow for a while, Luo Qinggu seemed to have understood something. This starlight flow is just a catalyst. The key is that it has stirred up the huge amount of spiritual qi in Ding of Shenzhou into chaos. When she thought of this, she opened her palm, and the Zuanchu sword appeared in her hand. As the sword's edge moved, the sword energy became as hot as fire, and the invisible sword intent turned into a tangible furnace in the air. This was the flaming heavenly sword, one of the great 9 heavens divine swords of the ancient heavenly gate. After the Tsangtian Dao Jian submitted to Lin Feng, the ancient heavenly gate's sword Dao technique also belonged to Xianmen Tianzong. When Luo Qinggu observed the Tsangtian Dao Jian, she also dabbled in the great 9 heavens divine sword Dao. Although she did not cultivate it well, it had the effect of comprehending other things by analogy, and she could refer to it to inspire her own sword Dao cultivation. The southern flaming heavenly sword of the great 9 heavens divine swords was the foundation that the ancient heavenly gates elites established after referring to Xia Huang's orthodoxy. As Xia Huang's own people gradually disappeared in the long river of history, his orthodoxy was gradually lost, and it was no longer a system. Only a few scattered techniques were passed down. In the entire history of the divine land, Xia Huang was the best in the water Dao technique, but other than that, Xia Huang was also quite accomplished in the fire Dao technique. His universal furnace technique used the heaven and earth as the furnace, creation as the technique, and yin and yang as the charcoal to smelt a part of the world and suppress and refine the enemy. It was extremely overbearing. The heavenly gate's flaming heavenly sword Dao had the principle of incorporating the essence of the universal furnace technique into it. As Luo Qingwu's sword moved, Zhu Yi immediately understood what she was thinking without any further words. He nodded and guided Luo Qingwu's sword intent into the transcendence energy of Hao Yang's clone. His qi and blood surged, and the concept of power spread out. He immediately felt that he had formed a subtle, almost undetectable, but real connection with Ding of Shenzhou. Hao Yang's clone punched the empty heaven and earth in front of him, and the chaotic flow of spiritual energy actually calmed down a little. Chapter 990. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone merged the sword intent of Luo Qingwu's heavenly sword of 9 heavens into his fist intent. Vaguely, it resonated with the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou. Wherever the fist intent reached, the turbulent flow of spiritual qi in the void gradually calmed down a little. Zhu Yi thought for a while and said, "I'll open the great cycle of 4 symbols formation. 4th junior sister, 6th junior brother, and little junior sister, help me. We'll stabilize the turbulence in the space around us, and have a place to stay in this world first." As he spoke, a spirit turtle the size of a small island, a qilin the size of a mountain, a dragon wrapped in auspicious clouds, and a colorful phoenix shining with brilliance all appeared above the head of Hao Yang's clone. The images of the 4 spirits gathered together. The surging spiritual qi turned into a huge ring, circulating and harmonizing, bearing the profound Tao of heaven and earth. In the ring, the images of the 4 spirits alternated. It was Zhu Yi's great cycle of 4 symbols formation. Although it was performed by Hao Yang's clone and its power was not as great as Zhu Yi's, it was still extraordinary. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone stood on the leading dragon's position, while Luo Qingwu landed on the Qilin's position. She continued to activate the sword intent of the heavenly sword of 9 heavens, and integrate it into the great cycle of 4 symbols formation. Li Yuanfang stood on the spirit turtle's position, while Yu Hongyan stood on the phoenix's position. They helped Zhu Yi and Luo Qingwu activate the great cycle of 4 symbols formation together. The huge ring formed by the formation expanded and finally stabilized the chaotic spiritual qi in a certain range, making it calm again. However, the ring kept expanding and shrinking, fighting with the turbulence of spiritual qi outside the formation. It could not be completely stabilized. Zhu Yi said, 6th Junior Martial Brother, Little Junior Martial Sister, summon your Yin spirit avatars. 2 of your avatars will take the lead. Tiantai and the others will support the formation and stabilize it completely. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu nodded at the same time. The Yin spirit doppelgangers that looked exactly the same as themselves appeared and stood opposite each other at the periphery. The positions they occupied were the heaven and earth positions of the 8 trigrams. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone flicked his sleeves, and several figures landed in the magic circle. The 2 youths were dressed in Xianmen Tianzong's standard purple robes. Tai Chi patterns were embroidered on the lapels of their robes, and there was a flying flame symbol on their cuffs. This was the symbol of Xianmen Tianzong's Fentianya's lineage. One of them was a handsome young man with a calm expression and sharp eyes. It was Tang Jun. At this moment, his cultivation base had reached the peak of the late Golden Elixir realm, and he was only 1 step away from the core formation realm. The other young man with a relaxed expression and a hint of unruliness was Lu Xiaofeng. Currently, his cultivation base was at the peak of the middle Golden Elixir realm. He had encountered a relatively major bottleneck in this realm, and had been stuck there for a long time. However, he was only a paper-thin distance away from the late Golden Elixir realm. Once he broke through the bottleneck, he could immediately pass through the Yin Wen tribulation. Although his cultivation base had been surpassed by Lin Tong and Tang Jun, who had entered the sect later than him, Lu Xiaofeng's eyes were calm, and the cynical smile on the corners of his mouth was still there. His state of mind was not adversely affected. Beside Tang Jun and Lu Xiaofeng stood a young man with a medium build. His expression was calm, and he first bowed towards Zhu Yi. Master. His clothing was the same as Tang Jun and Lu Xiaofeng. However, the symbol on the cuffs of his robes was different. There were 3 black horizontal lines, which was the same as the Qian trigram. This young man was Zhu Yi's Qiantian Palace Hall's head disciple, Yang Tai. Beside Yang Tai stood a beautiful woman in purple with a calm and gentle temperament. The symbol on the cuffs of her robes was a pattern that was half black and half white. Unlike the Tai Chi pattern where Yin and Yang blended and black and white coexisted, this pattern that was half black and half white was a straight line from the middle, dividing the circle into 2 equal halves. It was as if a black semicircle and a white semicircle were joined together. This woman and Lu Xiaofeng were both at the peak of the Golden Elixir middle stage. Similarly, she was only a step away from the late stage of the Golden Elixir. She was Wang Lin's successor disciple, Li Xingfei. Beside Li Xingfei stood a young man with a rather cold and stern expression between his brows. He wore a purple tight suit with a taiji pattern embroidered on the lapel. The cuffs were decorated with a golden and green semicircular arc that formed a complete circle. He was the only successor disciple of Yang Qing's Nirvana Paradise, Zhou Yunsong. Among the various branches of Xianmen Tianzong, Nirvana Paradise had the least number of people. Until now, Yang Qing only had 1 successor disciple. Today Zhou Yunsong and Tang Jun were both at the peak of the late stage of the Golden Elixir. They were only 1 step away from the nascent soul formation stage, but he had stayed here for a longer time than Tang Jun. The special physique of the burning sun body made his strength extraordinary in actual combat. It also had a lot of convenience in the process of ordinary cultivation, but it also made him more difficult than ordinary people. Unlike the cold and murderous Zhou Yunsong, the young man next to him was smiling and curiously looking at the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou, where the spiritual energy was chaotic. He had a long sword in a sheath hanging on his waist. The lapel of his purple robe had the same Tai Chi pattern as the others, and the symbol on his cuffs was a solid black circle. That was the symbol of the light dance pavilion under Luo Qinggu. This smiling young man was the first disciple of Luo Qinggu, Han Yang. Now he had also reached the late stage of the Golden Elixir. This time, the 6 of them were brought into the desolate ancient star sea by Lin Feng and his disciple. On the one hand, it was a trial. On the other hand, they were currently at a bottleneck in their own cultivation. If they could gain something from this trial, they would benefit a lot. This was especially true for Tang Jun, Zhou Yunsong, Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei. If they could gain something from this trial, it was almost guaranteed that they could break through their current realm. After the 6 people saluted Zhu Yi, Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu respectively, they immediately stood in the position of the 8 diagrams according to Zhu Yi's instructions. Together with the Yin spirit doppelgangers of Luo Qinggu and Li Yuanfang, they formed a formation, surrounding Zhu Yi and the other 3 people in the center. The 4 symbols' 8 trigrams, one inside and one outside, worked together. Under the control of Zhu Yi's great young doppelganger, the surrounding void was completely stabilized. The turbulent flow of spiritual energy was isolated, and a pure land was temporarily opened up in the world inside the divine land cauldron. After the 4 diagrams' great cycle formation was completely stabilized, Zhu Yi nodded. Although the turbulence of spiritual qi is still very chaotic and violent, it will become milder and milder until it completely calms down. He looked at Yang Tai and the others. However, it will take a long time. So we will stay here to stabilize the formation. You guys can withdraw first. Then, go to the periphery of the formation to explore. Expand the stabilized area to the periphery, and open up a path. A magical treasure of creation like Ding of Shenzhou is as vast as the sky. It is not obvious. First, we have to find a way to contact it, and then we can talk about other things. Yang Tai immediately replied, Master, don't worry. I will be careful. Li Yuanfang said, Go in different directions to save time. We can't be too scattered. After all, the environment is unknown. Yu Hongyan said, You and little junior sister's doppelganger can explore in different directions. Tiansong, Tiantai, and the others don't split up. Go in one direction together. Li Yuanfang and Luo Qinggu nodded together. 4th senior sister is right. Zhu Yi said, Although it's to save time, you don't have to be anxious. Activate the formation's power and extend it forward. Just advance steadily. When the spiritual qi in this world has completely stabilized, and we don't need to maintain the formation anymore, we will quickly catch up to you. Master, what if we meet people from Taishu Temple? Yang Tai asked after thinking for a while. Zhu Yi said calmly, Although there is a formation to defend against it, this place is not conducive for communication, due to the turbulence of spiritual qi in the outside world. Our divine senses, and the turbulence of spiritual qi will not be able to lock onto you. Therefore, you will have to act on your own. If Taishu Temple's Grand Elder Kai Fengzhou of the Tao Integration Realm gets close to the formation, I will be able to sense it immediately. When that happens, I will deal with him. You don't have to worry too much. Under normal circumstances, Kai Fengzhou will protect his group of Taishu Temple's successors, so that they will not be separated. Zhu Yi raised his head and looked at the distant world outside the formation. From time to time, there would be extremely violent turbulent tides. However, if he had encountered a similar tide before, there might have been an unknown accident. You guys can just adapt to it. Although he said that, Zhu Yi's expression was calm without the slightest hint of worry. Yang Tai and the other 5 also wore calm and composed expressions. They all cupped their fists at Zhu Yi in acknowledgement. Then they bowed to Zhu Yi and Yu Hongyan and left. Then they turned and walked into the distance. Meanwhile, Luo Qinggu and Li Yuanfang's Yin spirit doppelgangers also flew in different directions. Zhu Yi's Haoyang doppelganger, Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu's doppelgangers remained where they were, stabilizing the 4 symbols' great heavenly cycle formation. Yang Tai and the other 5 moved forward. Although with the gradual growth of their cultivation, they had been independent even when they went out to train, and it was rare for them to go out in a group like this. The 6 of them still had a very good tacit understanding. Han Yang walked at the forefront. The long sword at his waist had already been unsheathed, and the flaming heaven sword was the same as Luo Qinggu's. It led the formation boundary to extend forward, and gradually opened up a path. Yang Tai and Tang Jun followed closely beside him, one on the left and one on the right, constantly paying attention to the movements in the surroundings. As the formation boundary extended forward, the power of the formation would sometimes become unstable. It was inevitable that a small amount of turbulence of spiritual energy would leak in, instantly forming a terrible storm. Han Yang did not need to be distracted. Yang Tai and Tang Jun would handle it for him. Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei followed closely behind. Zhou Yunsong was the last, and his attention was also on the rear of the team. Han Yang suddenly stopped, sheathed his sword, and looked outside the formation in the distance. The turbulence of spiritual energy there was turbulent, and it was turning into a land of storms. The original world had become chaotic and broken. They could vaguely see that it was originally a valley, but the valley had been broken into a pile of rocks. The soil and rocks were even suspended in the air and kept colliding. In the center of the storm, they could vaguely see a few figures. Tang Jun and the others looked over, and saw that those people were dressed in white with white clouds embroidered on their lapels. It was the usual attire of the descendants of the Taishu Temple. These people were trapped in the center of the storm, and the turbulence of spiritual energy kept attacking them. These people were all in the Yuanying and Golden Elixir period. In such an environment, they were in dire straits and could be in danger at any time. Seeing this scene, Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others could not help but look at each other. Chapter 991. Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others could not help but look at each other as they watched the Taishu Temple's successor in the center of the spiritual qi turbulence, surrounded by perils. Yang Tai pondered and said, "They must have encountered the spiritual qi tide that Master mentioned, causing them to be separated from the Tao integration cultivator in the Taishu Temple. The spiritual qi turbulence in the outside world is still very intense, and cultivators below the primordial spirit stage will be in danger if they encounter it." Lu Xiaofeng stared at those figures carefully, and could not help but let out a soft cry of surprise. "Oh, there are even old acquaintances." The others all looked at him, and Lu Xiaofeng spread his hands. "One of them has a cultivation level of the Golden Elixir late stage. The shorter man is called Wan Jingluan. I met him when I went out to train not long ago." He paused and continued, "At that time, everyone had their eyes on a piece of star stone. It was hard to say who was first, so we fought over it based on our own abilities. In the end I won. There were no old grudges between us. He retreated, and I obtained the star stone, so I did not pursue him." Tang Jun and the others all nodded. If Lu Xiaofeng said he did not pursue him, then he really did not pursue him. Among the second-generation direct disciples, Lu Xiaofeng was one of the top 3 in terms of the art of escape. After he formed his gold core, he cultivated the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens. The divine ability he obtained was an art of escape called the Heavenly Meridian Wandering Qi, which was quite mysterious. The other 2 people were Han Yang, who was currently beside Lu Xiaofeng. He had studied the Shaozi sword of Shu Mountain, the swiftest dark heavenly sword among the ancient heavenly gates, Great 9 Heavens divine sword, and the flying heaven and earth escape technique of the 8 arts of heaven and earth, which were known for their exquisite speed. He had comprehended the Tao of the heavenly virtue scripture, and created a heavenly movement sword, which was extremely fast and had sharp attacks. The third person was Irosa, who was not present. His wolf movement technique was also unique, but it was completely suited to Irosa. If others wanted to learn it, it would be more difficult. Yang Tai looked at the 4 disciples of the Taishu Temple, who were trapped by the turbulence of spiritual qi, and said in a deep voice, "We are all from the human clan. Although there is competition in Ding of Shenzhou, we can't just sit back and do nothing since we have seen it. After all, we are not enemies with the Taishu Temple." Han Yang smiled. It's hard to say whether the other party thinks so or not. From the perspective of Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others, the situation in the Divine Land had become rather delicate. It had already become an enemy of the Taishu Temple, and undercurrents were surging in the dark. But on the surface, in the eyes of ordinary disciples, even if their relationship wasn't very harmonious, they weren't enemies either. Lin Feng and his disciple wouldn't deliberately instill opposing thoughts in their disciples. Everything would take its course. On the Taishu Temple's side, although Temple head Yan Nanlai, Lord Tai, and other members of the Supreme Elders Guild had already reached a consensus, it would still take a lot of planning for the situation to develop according to their plan. At the moment, it had not been communicated to the younger disciples. So in general, over the years, whether it was Xianmen Tianzong or Taishu Temple, there was still communication between them. It was still a long time before they shed all pretense of cordiality. However, there was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. As the 2 peaks of the human clan's cultivation world, The younger disciples of the two sects naturally didn't like each other. There were no major conflicts between the disciples of the two sects who had come out to gain experience, but there were many small frictions. Tang Jun said calmly, "So what if they treat us as enemies? Just let them come at us." Han Yang smiled carelessly and said, "Yes, so I don't care. You guys can decide. In the face of natural disasters, we'll just lend a hand," Li Xingfei said. "Although there might be competition in the future, we're not afraid of competition." Lu Xiaofeng smiled and said, "Don't look at me. I've already said that there's no enmity between me and that one Zhengluan. I wasn't the one who suffered back then. However, it doesn't matter if we help them. The problem is what happens after we help them. If we want to save them, we'll need to borrow the power of the formation and junior brother Han's flaming heavenly sword. When the time comes, they'll be brought into the formation together." As soon as Lu Xiaofeng said this, everyone's eyes flashed. Han Yang said lazily, "They'll most likely continue to move forward with us. If we ask them to follow the path we came from to master and martial uncle, they'll most likely be unwilling. They might even think that we're treating them like criminals." Yang Tai said, "Even if they're willing to go to master's side, we won't be able to rest assured. Master and the others are busy fighting the turbulence outside, so their perception of what's inside the formation is weaker. If anything happens, it might affect the entire formation." Tang Jun said calmly, "We can go in the same direction, but everyone will have to rely on their own abilities." He pointed at the turbulence of spiritual energy outside the formation that had yet to calm down. "As long as we get them out of the center of that particularly violent turbulence storm, it'll be fine. The turbulence outside has yet to subside, but as long as they stay where they are and don't move, at least their lives won't be in danger." After a moment of silence, Li Xingfei asked, "What if they don't want to? We're not on the same side. If they want to be parasites crawling on our bodies and sucking our blood, they're dreaming." Tang Jun said lightly, "Helping them now is just us being nosy. We don't expect them to thank us, nor do we expect anything in return. It'll be fine as long as they're self-aware. If they're not self-aware, then we'll have to help them a little more and throw them out." The conflict between the two sides was not sharp, so they wouldn't leave them in the lurch, nor would they take advantage of them. Like Han Yang, Tang Jun didn't care about the possible competition or future troubles. But he wasn't interested in actively supporting the enemy. In Tang Jun's view, it wasn't called having a big picture or being magnanimous. It was unfair and irresponsible to one's own people. Yang Tai said, "If we fight inside the formation, it will also affect the formation. It's better to take them with us. If they do anything unusual, it'll be easier for us to respond." Lu Xiaofeng patted Tang Jun's shoulder and said, "Junior brother Tang, even if something happens, I believe we can handle it." On the other side, Li Xingfei also said, "The contact with other forces isn't all tit for tat. After all, the Taishu Temple is different from the Underworld Hall, the Great Zhou Dynasty, and the Mount Shu Sword Sect. There's no unresolvable conflict between our sect and them." Tang Jun looked at her, Lu Xiaofeng and Yang Tai, and finally nodded. He was a very assertive person and wouldn't be easily swayed. But unlike his tough style of dealing with outsiders, he was much easier to talk to his fellow disciples. Although he had different ideas, he didn't intend to quarrel with his fellow disciples. He just had to be more vigilant to guard against unexpected situations. Zhou Yunsong remained silent and indifferently stood where he was. He didn't agree or disagree. His thoughts were the same as Han Yang's. He had an indifferent attitude. Yang Tai then looked at Han Yang and said, "I still need you to do it." "No problem." Han Yang smiled and unsheathed the long sword at his waist again. "But this turbulent storm is stronger than before. I can't just use the sword in my hand. I need to use the absolute sword. Everyone, help me keep an eye on it and stabilize the formation at any time." Han Yang's sword was not a very sharp sword. It was a magic sword of the Zhuji realm, and it was obtained not long after he joined Luo Qingwu's sect. Compared to his current cultivation, it obviously couldn't keep up with the situation. Although he was a disciple of Luo Qingwu, his swordsmanship wasn't completely the same as Luo Qingwu's. His talent in the swordsmanship wasn't like Luo Qingwu's. which was why he didn't forge the Xianqie sword as Luo Qingwu's life-bound sword. However, the reason he had been using this magic sword of the Zhuji realm until now and hadn't changed it wasn't because the sword was still suitable, but because there wasn't much difference whether he changed it or not. With a thought from Han Yang, countless tiny runes suddenly appeared on his right arm that was covered by his sleeve, emitting a black light. These runes seemed to have a life of their own. They flowed along Han Yang's arm like a tide toward the magic sword in his right hand. On the back of Han Yang's right hand that was exposed outside his sleeve, a large number of tiny runes flowed past his fingers. In the end, all the runes flowed onto the magic sword in his right hand. The magic sword's blade, chin, hilt, and other parts were completely covered by the large number of black runes. The runes fused and disappeared, and the entire sword shone with a black light. Then, on the black sword's blade and hilt, tiny cracks faintly split open, from which a blood-red light flashed. Wisps of black mist spiraled above the sword, and a tyrannical killing intent soared into the sky. It was an ominous sight. The aura of magic power that leaked from within was shockingly the might and power of a sword of the Yuanying realm. Han Yang's expression was relaxed as he held the black sword in his hand, and once again executed the flaming heavenly sword. The sword's momentum was much stronger than before, and it was also much more savage. Relying on the four symbols' great cycle formation laid down by Zhu Yi and the others, Han Yang's sword caused the formation's range to greatly extend forward. At the same time, it also split apart the turbulent storm that surrounded the Taishu Temple cultivators. However, the momentum of his sword was too fierce, causing the flaming heavenly sword intent to become unstable, and its connection with the formation also became shaky. Tang Jun and the others stayed by his side, ready to help at any time to deal with the adverse effects that would arise from the formation breaking. However, Han Yang's control was rather precise. It seemed like he was on the verge of losing control, but in the end he still firmly controlled the sword's momentum, and did not let his sword intent break the connection with the four symbols' great cycle formation. The turbulent storm broke apart, and the four Taishu Temple cultivators also entered the four symbols' great cycle formation. Although they were surrounded by danger just now, the four Taishu Temple cultivators still looked very calm, showing their extraordinary confidence and experience. However, when they saw that the people who helped them were Han Yang and the other Xianmen Tianzong disciples, they also felt slightly embarrassed. This was especially so when one of the shorter youths saw Lu Xiaofeng, and his eyes clearly darkened. The four of them were dressed in the Taishu Temple's usual attire, white robes with a white cloud embroidered on their lapels. The one with the highest cultivation base was a young man in the middle stage of Yuanying. He looked at the people from Xianmen Tianzong with a somewhat complicated gaze, but he still maintained enough etiquette and cupped his hands at Tang Jun and the others. "I'm Shan Xiang from Taishu Temple. Thank you, fellow cultivators from Xianmen Tianzong." Next to him stood a young girl with a heroic spirit. Her eyes were sharp, and she also thanked Han Yang and the others politely. "I'm Zhao Mingxiu from Taishu Temple. Thank you, fellow cultivators, for your help." As for the other two people, other than the shorter Wan Zhengluan, the other one was a skinny young man with pale skin, an aquiline nose, thin lips, and a cold expression. He also cupped his hands, but his tone was obviously much colder. "I'm Yang Zhao from Taishu Temple. Greetings." Wan Zhengluan looked at Lu Xiaofeng again, and finally, he also cupped his hands. "I'm Wan Zhengluan from Taishu Temple. Greetings." Han Yang looked at Wan Zhengluan and chuckled, then turned to look at Lu Xiaofeng. Lu Xiaofeng naturally understood what he meant, so he smiled and spread his hands. Chapter 992. Among the four people from Taishu Temple, other than Shan Xiang, who was in the middle stage of Yuanying, the other three were in the late stage of Golden Elixir. Although there was a difference between their appearance and actual age, their actual age was not that old. Yang Tai looked at them and asked, "Fellow Taoists, what do you plan to do next?" Shan Xiang and the others observed their surroundings, and then looked at Yang Tai and the others. "Are you going to open up a passage and explore into the distance?" Yang Tai nodded calmly. "That's right." Shan Xiang and the others looked at each other, and it was Shan Xiang who said in a low voice, "The direction you are heading in now is the place where we were separated from Elder Kai and the others. We want to meet up with the elders of the sect as soon as possible, and we hope to travel together with you." Hearing this, the gazes of the Xianmen Tianzong people became a little strange. They smiled slightly, which made Shan Xiang and the others puzzled and slightly unhappy. In the past, no matter where they went, they would inevitably take the lead of the group. In particular, Shan Xiang was the only Yuanying cultivator among them, but it was not appropriate for him to do so when facing Tang Jun and the other disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. The relationship between the two sides was not harmonious, and Tang Jun and the others did not come here alone. Looking at the four symbols' great cycle formation, one could tell that Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others had not been separated from Zhu Yi and the others. Everyone was now under the protection of Zhu Yi, Li Yuanfang, and the others. Unlike the arrogant, sharp, and sharpshoe mountain disciples, most of the descendants of Taishu Temple were well-mannered, and their style was much gentler. But in fact, the pride in their hearts was only greater than that of the Shu Mountain disciples. It was just that the external appearance of this pride was rather special, and it was easy to give people the wrong impression. Their pride was not contempt, insolence, or condescension. On the contrary, they were amiable, polite, and patient. It was a sense of superiority that was rooted in the depths of one's heart. Because your level was too far from mine, I could tolerate your ignorance and clumsiness, and would not lower myself to your level. Just like how humans would not be angered by the provocation of ants, nor would they show off their superiority and strength to ants. Since the ancient era, when the successors of the Taishu Temple traveled outside, even when facing the cultivators of the Shu Mountain Sword sect, who were at a similar level, or the Buddhist disciples of the Great Thunderclap Temple, this kind of psychological advantage had always existed. But today, when facing the successor of Xianmen Tianzong, this psychological advantage had gradually collapsed. At the same time, because Taishu Temple took the elite route, the threshold was ridiculously high. At that time, they would also verify that the disciples they accepted were all amazing cultivation geniuses. Therefore, in the eyes of many young people, being accepted by Taishu Temple was also a kind of affirmation for themselves. But today, this situation had gradually begun to change. With the accumulation of fame over the years, there were still many young heroes who desired to worship under Taishu Temple. But with the rise of Xianmen Tianzong, and its influence in the divine land was growing, more and more people began to turn their attention to Xianmen Tianzong. Many people's first choice was still Taishu Temple, but at the same time, there were also many people whose first choice had become Xianmen Tianzong. In particular, some people who did not have the most outstanding physique could also worship under Xianmen Tianzong to learn Dao techniques. Not only would their future achievements not be low, they might even have higher achievements than worshipping under Taishu Temple. Unlike Mount Shu Sword Sect, which only valued sword talents, and unlike Great Thunderclap Monastery, whose pure cultivation of Buddhist Dharma caused some people to shrink back, Xianmen Tianzong had a serious impact on Taishu Temple in terms of talent attraction. And the impact was becoming more and more intense. Just as the overall influence of both sides was equally divided in the divine land, even the attraction of younger talents was now on an equal footing. Therefore, in front of others, the descendants of Taishu Temple could still maintain their pride, but in front of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, they could not maintain a psychological advantage. Yang Zhao looked at Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others in front of him. His face became even paler, and his gaze became even colder. He opened his mouth and asked faintly, "Forgive me for being presumptuous, my friends from Xianmen Tianzong. Who is the leader now?" His gaze swept across the logos on the sleeves of Tang Jun and the others, and finally looked at Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and Lu Xiaofeng. When Yang Tai heard this, his expression did not change, but he frowned slightly. Although Lu Xiaofeng did not say anything, his eyebrows slightly raised. The other party's words really did not have any good intentions. Tang Jun smiled coldly. His gaze swept across Yang Zhao's face, but did not stop. His gaze finally fell on Shan Xiang, and he said faintly, "If the four of you from Taishu Temple wish to travel together, it is not a problem. However, the formation we are in now was set up by the elders of our sect. My friends, please do not use your mana rashly, lest you suffer the backlash of the formation's power. Shan Xiang looked at the surrounding environment and immediately nodded. Everyone, you can rest assured. Tang Jun grunted. There's no time to lose, let's continue moving. Yang Zhao looked at him. His ice-cold gaze became deeper, and it made people's hearts palpitate. No one answered his question, but Tang Jun's action just now gave an invisible response. Who is the leader on our side? There is no need for you to ask because you are not the leader on your side anyway. Yang Zhao did not say much, and calmly followed behind Shan Xiang with Wan Zhengluan and Zhao Mingxiu, traveling with Xianmen Tianzong and the others. The group was still Han Yang opening the path at the front, but the sword he was using right now had already returned to its original ordinary appearance. A simple foundation establishment stage sword. In the eyes of the people from the Taishu temple, they couldn't help but cast sidelong glances. After all, it was not a secret in the divine land that the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were well off, and their families were rich. There were people who praised this, but there were also many who thought that this was not conducive to the cultivation of the cultivators themselves, and there was a lot of controversy in the divine land. Han Yang's identity as the second-generation successor head disciple of the Light Dance Pavilion was also not a secret in the divine land. After all, his cultivation was already at the late stage of the golden elixir, but with his current cultivation, the sword he used was only at the foundation establishment stage, so it was inevitable that people would be surprised. Han Yang did not care much about other people's gazes, and instead he was teasing Yang Tai, senior brother Yang. It is said that people with the same surname were a family 500 years ago, but that Yang Zhao of Taishu Temple is not close to you. Yang Tai smiled. Maybe it was not very pleasant when we wanted to separate from the family. Li Xingfei said softly. This person is not simple, his magical power and his mind are very deep. Lu Xiaofeng nodded. Although we have not actually fought, I feel that he is at least stronger than Wan Zhengluan, and more dangerous. Stronger and more dangerous seem to have the same meaning, but Li Xingfei and the others all knew that in many cases, stronger and more dangerous were not the same. Danger was always something to be vigilant about. If he does not have a primordial spirit magic treasure with him, there is nothing to worry about. Tang Jun said calmly, unless he uses the spiritual energy turbulence in Ding of Shenzhou to do something bad. Han Yang said, I am more interested in that Zhao Mingxiu fellow Taoist Zhao. Lu Xiaofeng smiled. Oh, junior brother Han has finally grown up. Han Yang shook his head and said with a smile, not at all. I am interested in her because she is a rare sword cultivator in Taishu Temple. As soon as he said this, Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others all became interested, and even Zhou Yunsong, who had been silent all this time, turned to look at him. Han Yang nodded, and with another sword strike, he continued to open the way forward. At the same time he said, although she did not use her sword, nor did she release her sword will and magical power, I can faintly feel it. Yang Tai pondered and said, the swordsmanship of Taishu Temple is derived from their own two great Taoist techniques, the Supreme Wang Qing Dao and the Void Yin Yang Dao. It is not an independent swordsmanship. It is said that it is also quite exquisite, but it is indeed very rare. I wonder if this fellow Taoist Zhao cultivates the Wang Qing Heavenly Sword, or the Great Void Twin Pole Mystic Sword technique. As he said this, Han Yang, Tang Jun, and Zhou Yunsong suddenly changed their expressions. Yang Tai and the others also suddenly looked solemn. They looked up and saw that outside the area of the spell formation, an extremely violent spiritual energy tide was blasting toward where they were. Chapter 993. On the whole, the chaotic spiritual energy turbulence in the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou was gradually calming down. However, in some parts of the world, there were still occasional violent waves that were extremely destructive. At this moment, the waves that were rushing towards the area where Han Yang and the others were located were quite violent. Shan Xiang and the other three looked solemn when they saw it. This wave was much more violent than the spiritual energy turbulence that had trapped them earlier. Even many primordial soul adepts could not withstand it. It was comparable to the wave that had separated them from Kai Fengzhou and the others. Fortunately, Han Yang and the others were now inside the Four Symbols Great Cycle formation that Zhu Yi and the others had set up. Zhu Yi and the other three would activate the formation's power to resist the impact of this wave. Han Yang immediately put away his sword. Under such circumstances, he naturally could not continue to expand the path outwards. Otherwise, it would cause the formation to become unstable, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Even so, the formation became violently shaken under the impact of the wave of spiritual energy. The ground that the younger disciples were standing on could not stop shaking. After all, they were in the outer area of the formation, and they were in a newly opened path. It was inevitable that the protection of the formation would be slightly weaker. Cracks appeared in the void in front of them, and the wild spiritual energy rushed in like strong wind blades, bombarding the group. Xianmen Tianzong and the others walked in front, and immediately faced this sudden danger. However, although they were shocked, they did not panic. Yang Tai, who was standing beside Han Yang, took a step forward and blocked in front of Han Yang. Then, with a flip of his palm, a small shield appeared in his palm. The small shield was raised by Yang Tai, and it grew with the wind. In an instant, it turned into a square shield that was 1 meter square. The shield lit up, and at the same time, it extended to the 4 sides, condensing into 4 flashing white corners, causing the shield to look like an upright square. Then another layer of light covered the shield, and continued to extend outwards, turning into an even larger square. As the cycle continued, the light continued to expand, making the shield bigger and bigger, protecting Yang Tai and the others behind it. This was a Yuanying stage magic tool bestowed by Zhu Yi to Yang Tai as the first disciple of the Qiantian Hall. Its defensive power was considered outstanding among the Yuanying stage magic tools. After Yang Tai raised the defensive shield, Tang Jun, who was next to him, immediately pinched his hands together, and a white halo appeared. This ring of light was formed from runes that flickered with white light. They turned into a ring that wrapped around everyone present. The runes continued to revolve, and the ring of light also continued to revolve. A perfect and flawless concept of power flowed out from it, forming a powerful defensive effect. This technique was called the defensive realm of the heavenly law. It was a magical technique that most disciples of Xianmen Tianzong practiced, and it was specifically used for defense. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others were all extremely talented people. None of them liked to be passive and defensive, but as a teacher, they had to teach in accordance with their aptitude. They couldn't expect every disciple to be exactly the same as them, the master. Especially when the younger disciples traveled outside, it was inevitable that they would encounter unknown dangers. So for the sake of safety, when Xiao Yan and the others were compiling the basic paths, techniques, and magical techniques of the sect, they had specially created this magical technique for returning to the heavenly law realm. As one of the few defensive techniques within Xianmen Tianzong, this magical technique's defensive power was very trustworthy. Yang Tai's defensive realm of the heavenly law realm came from the same source as this technique. Not only did Tang Jun execute the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm immediately, but the others in Xianmen Tianzong also knew that they were at a critical juncture. So, not only did Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei execute the defensive realm together, even Han Yang and Zhou Yunsong did the same. Their styles leaned toward swift and fierce attacks, and they weren't keen on defense. But under Luo Qinggu and Yang Qing's guidance, they also knew the magical technique of returning to the heavenly law realm. 5 white halos appeared at the same time, encircling everyone and the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm. As the talisman characters flashing with white light rotated, they resonated with the power of the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm. On the other hand, the owner of the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm, Yang Tai, didn't execute the magical technique of returning to the heavenly law realm. Instead, he changed his hand seals continuously. A yellow light appeared on his left hand, and an azure water droplet appeared on his right hand. The yellow light contained a strong power concept of the thick earth. It was silent, heavy, and looked ordinary, but it was extremely vast, as if it could bear everything and contain everything. It was the central earth divine light. As for the azure water droplet, although it was floating in midair, anyone could feel its weight. It was as if each droplet weighed tens of thousands of pounds. It was one of the 6 great true waters of the world, the true water of the origin. The 6 great true waters each had their own unique abilities. The true water of the yellow springs could purify everything in the world. The true water of the blood river was the most filthy in the world. The true water of the first sky could transform everything in the world. The true water of the Xian Ming was the coldest, and the true water of the moon was the softest and most which could be used to control water. The unique characteristic of the primordial true water was that it was extremely condensed and extremely heavy. After it was transformed into magical power, it was vigorous, exquisite, and boundless. It surged and gurgled with great momentum. Everyone in the Taishu temple looked at Yang Tai with solemn expressions. Xianmen Tianzong, the first seat of Qiantian Palace's disciple, Yang Tai, is indeed extraordinary. Over the years, many disciples of Xianmen Tianzong had left the mountain to train, and many of them had already become famous. Yang Zhao was expressionless. His gaze swept across Tangjun, Hanyang, and Zhou Yunsong. People say that among the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, the 3 strongest people in the same realm are Tangjun, the first seat of Fenshan Cliff, Hanyang, the first seat of Light Dance Pavilion, and Zhou Yunsong, the first seat of Nirvana Paradise. But now, it seems that this Yang Tai is not someone easy to deal with. He used his magical power to transmit his voice to the other 3 disciples, and Shan Xiang also used his magical power to transmit his voice. The water should be the primordial true water. As for the yellow light, although I don't know the details, it contains the true meaning of thick earth. This person is calm, and his magical power is also inclined towards defense. Although he is passive, in terms of the amount of magical power, I'm afraid that he is above Tangjun and the other 2. His ability to attack attacks may not be enough, but it is extremely difficult for others to defeat him. There was something that Shan Xiang did not say out loud. If Yang Tai, who cultivated the primordial true water and the central earth divine light, were to compete in terms of the amount of magical power, even he, a middle Yuanying intermediate Taishu temple's direct disciple, would not dare to say that he could win easily. However, Zhao Mingxiu, Yang Zhao, and Wan Zhengluan, who were brought into the desolate ancient Star Sea by Yuanying, were all outstanding elite disciples who were carefully cultivated by the Taishu temple. Naturally, they had this kind of judgment. This reminded them of some rumors about Yang Tai. As for the outstanding disciples of the younger generation in Xianmen Tianzong, all the major forces in the divine land were very concerned. Compared to Tangjun, Hanyang, and Zhou Yunsong, who were murderous and incisive, Yang Tai's reputation was slightly weaker, but he had already made a name for himself in the divine continent. Those with similar cultivation realms to Yang Tai's had all expressed that fighting him in the past was a complete torture, and it seemed as if they would never see any hope of victory. Practically all of them were dragged down and tortured to death by Yang Tai. It was slightly better if his opponent was willing to stop, otherwise, the outcome of the battle was usually extremely aggrieved. Yang Zhao was still expressionless, and his eyes were cold. However, Wan Zhengluan's expression was slightly strange. His eyes were wandering, as if he was distracted. It was only when his eyes fell on Lu Xiaofeng that Wan Zhengluan's eyes regained focus. Zhao Mingxiu turned to look at Shan Xiang. "Brother Shan, should we help?" Shan Xiang pondered for a while Yang Zhao said silently, "They don't seem to want us to help, so let's see what they can do." Zhao Mingxiu frowned, but the scene in front of her quickly attracted her attention. Yang Tai suddenly put his hands together, and the earth divine light in his left hand and the primordial pure water in his right hand suddenly combined. Seeing this, Zhao Mingxiu, Shan Xiang, and the other 2 people's eyes also shone with a strange light. They watched as the earthy yellow light and the drops of primordial pure water merged, and finally became one, turning into an increasingly powerful and heavy power. This power turned into an ocean-like light, spreading in all directions, but was limited to the area of Tangjun and the other 4 people's heaven-reversing Dharma realm. The light became more and more dazzling, and all of it was added to the heaven-reversing Dharma shield and heaven-reversing Dharma realm, forming a light ball. Yang Tai cultivated the scripture of Tao of Heaven, comprehending the path, techniques, and mystical arts, central primordial heaven sealing realm. Among the mystical arts created by the second-generation true disciples, It was the strongest defensive technique. The powerful defense made Shan Xiang's eyes narrow, and his heart felt heavy. As disciples of the Taishu Temple, they had their reasons to be proud. Their path was mysterious, and their mystical arts were amazing. Against the heirs of other forces, they would have a great advantage. It was rare for them to meet an opponent of the same level, and it was not impossible for them to kill an enemy of a higher level. However, looking at the huge light ball, Shan Xiang, who was in the middle stage of yuanying, had no confidence that he could break through its defense. In fact, deep in his heart, Shan Xiang could not help but suspect that even if he were to advance to the late stage of yuanying and achieve the Dharma of heaven and earth, he might not be able to do anything to his opponent. This discovery made Shan Xiang's heart sink. These are only the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, and their cultivation is only in the golden elixir period. If they are already like this, then Yu Hongyan, who is in the yuanying period, is even more unimaginable. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to avenge myself. This was the result of the Taishu Temple's people arriving late. Shan Xiang did not get to see the scene of Yu Hongyan, Luo Qinggu, and Li Yuanfang working together to kill Blood Mane Great Sage. Otherwise, he would have felt even more bitter at this moment. Although this violent tide was shocking, it came and went quickly. The power of the four symbols' great cycle formation flowed, and quickly filled the gap. Later on, when they encountered similar situations, Yang Tai and his brothers cooperated well, and they were more scared than hurt. In the end, the spiritual energy turbulence outside gradually subsided, and no longer posed a threat. The four symbols' great cycle formation that enveloped everyone also gradually withdrew. The group continued forward. Shan Xiang and the others did not part ways, but they still did not communicate much with each other. However, at this moment, another violent spiritual energy turbulence storm suddenly attacked. Yang Tai and the others did not panic, and still cooperated well to block it. Although the spiritual energy tide this time was not as fierce as before, it was still not something that ordinary cultivators below the primordial spirit realm could resist. At this moment, without the protection of the four symbols' great cycle formation, Yang Tai and the others also needed to concentrate. Beneath the combined defense of the Heaven Reversal Barrier, the five-layered Heaven Reversal Barrier, and the primordious Heavenly Sealing Barrier, some cracks appeared on the sphere of light. But these cracks were quickly repaired by the flowing light. But new cracks constantly appeared all around. For a moment, the two sides fell into a stalemate, restraining each other. Such a violent spiritual energy storm could not last for long, and it would soon weaken. However, at this moment, Wan Zhengluan, who was obviously distracted, took a step forward, seemingly unintentionally. Under the fluctuation of his magic power, he actually touched a crack. Chapter 994. Shan Xiang was thinking about his own matters, so he couldn't help but be distracted by his surroundings and wasn't very sensitive. However, he was still in the middle stage of yuanying, so he quickly noticed something strange. He looked at Wan Zhengluan in shock. "Brother Wan, what are you doing?" Shan Xiang activated his transcendence energy and restrained Wan Zhengluan. Zhao Mingxiu also looked at Wan Zhengluan in surprise. Yang Zhao's eyes also flashed. Restrained by Shan Xiang's transcendence energy, Wan Zhengluan recovered from his somewhat absent-minded state, but his eyes didn't become clear. Instead, they became sharper and more stubborn. "Brother Shan, since the ancient era, our temple has been the most powerful force in the divine land. We should dominate the world, and all the heavens should obey us. How can we sit back and watch a small Xianmen Tianzong rule over our temple?" Wan Zhengluan took a deep breath. His expression was calm, but his eyes were extremely sharp. "Right now, Xianmen Tianzong is the biggest obstacle in our temple's rule over China. Pang Jia, Martial Uncle Pang, the person with double pupils, and Senior Sister Bai, our temple has lost more than 1 or 2 disciples under Xianmen Tianzong. Brother Shan, let's not talk about others, but Senior Sister Bai is still suffering in the small world." Hearing this, Shan Xiang's expression didn't change, but his eyes suddenly became deep. Bai Shiqian, who was injured by Yu Hongyan in the past, was his junior sister under the same master, and also his Taoist partner. Today, 10 years had passed in the boundless universe, But for Shan Xiang, the scene of Bai Shiqian returning to Bai Yin Mountain with serious injuries and a damaged soul seemed like just yesterday. During the battle between Yu Hongyan and Bai Shiqian, both sides' martial arts and spells were extremely fierce and violent, and lives were often lost. Neither side showed mercy, or else they would only die. If Xianlin Taoist hadn't arrived in time that day, Bai Shiqian would have died. Even so, she still breathed in more than she breathed out, and almost couldn't be saved. Luckily, the Taishu Temple's foundation was strong enough, and thus Bai Shiqian's life was saved. But from then on, she was always bedridden, unable to get up, let alone recover her cultivation. All these years, Bai Shiqian had been recuperating in a small grotto heaven where time was changing. However, it was not a grotto heaven that sped up time. Instead, it slowed down time so that she would suffer less pain. Dan Xiang and the others who were close to her made the best use of their time to go out and search for a cure. Although he knew that Yu Hongyan and Bai Shiqian had a fair battle, and they both relied on their own abilities, Shan Xiang still felt angry every time he saw Bai Shiqian, who was half dead, and he couldn't control himself. Although he and Bai Shiqian were Taoist partners, and they were disciples taught by the same master, their views were actually not the same. Bai Shiqian was a radical, and his views were more neutral, even more conservative. But because of what happened to Bai Shiqian, he had a bad impression of Xianmen Tianzong. It was just that when Han Yang and the others helped him get out of trouble, it made him feel awkward, and he temporarily suppressed the hostility in his heart. But now, looking at the slightly agitated Wan Zhengluan, Shan Xiang couldn't help but fall silent. His silence naturally loosened the transcendence power that restrained Wan Zhengluan. Wan Zhengluan didn't say anything, and he used his transcendence power, and the billowing clouds attacked Yang Tai and the others, who were resisting the spiritual energy tide. Brother Shan, senior brother Wan. Zhao Mingxiu was stunned, and she immediately frowned. If you want to fight with Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, then just fight. Why do you have to do this? Aren't you making a fool out of yourself? Yang Zhao said coldly, Sister Zhao, it's because you're too conservative that anyone dares to bully us now. Among the 4 people present, he and Wan Zhengluan were radicals, while Zhao Mingxiu was a standard conservative. Shan Xiang was conservative when facing other sects, but when facing Xianmen Tianzong, he was also hostile. Yang Zhao looked at Zhao Mingxiu and said expressionlessly, there will definitely be a battle between us and Xianmen Tianzong in the future. Not to mention now, we're all competing for the Ding of Shenzhou. How can we give such an important weapon to Xianmen Tianzong so easily, and let them get even more powerful? There's no need to talk about morality when facing an enemy, just look at the result. Yang Zhao's eyes were cold, and his tone was cold. We've protected Shenzhou for so many years, and we didn't do it by being kind to others. It's true that we're the first holy land of the righteous alliance, but that's because of our strength. Outsiders hope that we're honorable and virtuous gentlemen. But that's because a gentleman can be deceived. They can bind our hands and feet, which is beneficial to them. Silently, Yang Zhao said, what outsiders think is their business, but if we take it seriously, it will only make our hands and feet tied, and we won't be able to do anything. Zhao Mingxiu frowned. Senior brother Yang, forgive me for not agreeing with you. It's true that some of our actions are not honorable, but it's all for the sake of protecting the divine land and the world of the human clan. That's our ultimate goal. Mingxiu is not a pedantic person. For the sake of the big plan, we can't care about some small things most of the time. But at least we should have some basic bottom lines, and we should always do things with a clear conscience. Yang Zhao said indifferently, are you saying that Brother Wan and I return kindness with enmity and bury our conscience? Zhao Mingxiu looked straight into his cold eyes and said seriously, whether you have a clear conscience or not, you have to ask yourself. But no matter whether you have a clear conscience or not, your behavior has made others laugh at you. Whether we win or lose, as the successor of our temple, don't you even have the confidence to fight head-on with others? A slight smile appeared on Yang Zhao's originally expressionless face. He moved his feet and stood between Zhao Mingxiu and Wan Zhengluan. He said calmly, Sister Zhao, on the contrary, whether we win or lose, it's not suitable for us to fight head-on with Xianmen Tianzong, and this has nothing to do with our personal strength and confidence. Zhao Mingxiu was slightly stunned, and her face faintly showed a hint of understanding. Yang Zhao looked at her and nodded. They are all core disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. With Xianmen Tianzong's domineering style, if something happens to them, Xianmen Tianzong will certainly not sit by and do nothing. It's true that I hate Xianmen Tianzong, but I have to admit that this sect has the real ability to threaten our temple. I don't know what the elders think of Xianmen Tianzong. If we kill these disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, it may affect the arrangements of our elders. Yang Zhao's voice was calm, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. But if the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong are really hateful, then what should we do? An accident would be the best outcome. He looked at Yang Tai and the others. Sister Zhao, you think that Brother Wan is taking advantage of them, but what I think is that although this place has left the formation of the high-level experts of Xianmen Tianzong, will we be discovered? As he spoke, Yang Zhao suddenly raised his hand and shot out a talisman. This talisman suddenly scattered and turned into streams of light, vaguely enveloping this part of the world. However, these streams of light did not prohibit people from entering or leaving, nor did they have any defensive ability. Their purpose was to isolate and block the perception of the outside cultivators, as well as the communication between the inside and the outside world. Because they only had one purpose, they were extremely powerful in this aspect. Zhao Mingxiu's brows furrowed even tighter. Senior brother Yang Yu. When Yang Zhao raised his hand, Wan Zhengluan's footsteps paused slightly, but after seeing his movements clearly, he couldn't help but chuckle. He raised his hand and a stream of transcendence energy fell on the light ball that enveloped Yang Tai and the others, creating a small gap. The struggle between the light ball and the spiritual energy storm outside was in a fragile balance. When Wan Zhengluan's transcendence energy was released, the light ball suddenly shook slightly, and the spiritual energy storm also suddenly paused, then became even more violent. Shan Xiang watched the scene in silence. He didn't step forward to help Wan Zhengluan, nor did he stop him. Silently, he just watched from the sidelines. On the other hand, Yang Zhao looked at Zhao Mingxiu and said casually, "To be honest, I'm a little grateful to them for helping us get out of trouble just now. But other than that, I feel more humiliated and embarrassed to be helped by someone I hate. This also makes me hate Xianmen Tianzong even more. I don't deny that my brother Wan's and my behavior is very despicable in the eyes of the general public, even in the eyes of some fellow disciples like you, Sister Zhao. What do you say in the secular world? Tasteless? Despicable?" Yang Zhao's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were cold. It doesn't matter. Buddhists pay particular attention to laying down the butcher's knife and becoming a Buddha immediately. But in my opinion, cultivation is done according to the heart and the situation. Since I still have obsessions in my heart, I will do as I please. When I get what I want, my obsessions will be resolved, and everything will be clear. He looked at Zhao Mingxiu and said, "Sister Zhao, I know you have your own insistence and ideas, so I don't mind that your point of view is different from mine. If you want to stop Brother Wan, then I will stop you. We'll just have to rely on our own abilities. You can stop me and Brother Wan today, but that's fine. Brother Wan and I will find another opportunity in the future. But I don't think you can get past me." Yang Zhao smiled indifferently. "Sister Zhao, I've always known that you're sharp in fights of magical powers. But at least, you won't be able to get past me in a short period of time. And during this time, Brother Wan will be done." Zhao Mingxiu took a deep breath and turned her head to look at Shan Xiang. Shan Xiang had the highest cultivation among them. If he really made a move, he could quickly subdue Wan Zhengluan and Yang Zhao. But now, Shan Xiang clearly didn't intend to intervene. In a sense, it was equivalent to tacit approval. Seeing this scene, Zhao Mingxiu deeply suspected that if Yu Hongyan was among the people trapped in the spiritual energy storm, Shan Xiang might even join forces with Wan Zhengluan. At this moment, the spiritual energy storm that was affected by Wan Zhengluan suddenly became stronger, while the defense of Yang Tai and the others became unstable. Under this situation, the situation suddenly became dangerous. In the light sphere, Yang Tai, Lu Xiaofeng, and Li Xingfei sighed at the same time. Tang Jun, on the other hand, waved his hand at them and said, "The same rice feeds all kinds of people. This is nothing strange. He looked at the flowing light barrier formed by the talisman characters in front of him and smiled coldly. As expected, it's necessary to be vigilant against others. As he said this, Tang Jun temporarily retracted his heaven reversal magic realm. The light sphere became even more unstable and was on the verge of collapsing. However, Tang Jun's eyes suddenly lit up with a green light. Within the green light, a small flame could be faintly seen incessantly flickering in each of his eye sockets. However, these flames weren't bright, but rather a patch of pale white. A milky white pure yang fire lit up on Tang Jun's body. But as this milky white pure yang fire swayed, it gradually changed color and turned into a pale white that was close to gray. At the same time, it shone with a green light. Chapter 995. Tang Jun's body lit up with a pale flame that flickered with a green luster. Wherever the light of the flame shone, time seemed to come to a standstill, giving people a feeling that it was neither hot nor warm. Instead, it was a feeling of desolation and aging. The feeling of time being like water made people's hearts go cold. Kill them, or leave them alive? Han Yang said with a smile unconcerned. Zhou Yunsong, who was beside him, still did not say anything. However, a faint black light appeared in his eyes, and the sharp killing intent made the hearts of his fellow disciples feel cold. Tang Jun said coldly, "That will depend on how much ability they have." Han Yang smiled. Although he continued to maintain the returning Heaven Law Realm's magical power, he suddenly opened his mouth, and a small black dot flew out from it. This small black dot grew with the wind, and quickly transformed into a huge sword case in midair. It was 8 feet and 1 inch tall, square in shape, and landed in front of everyone. This was one of the 2 Yuanying ritual implements that Han Yang, as the second-generation true disciple of the Light Dance Pavilion, had been bestowed upon him by Luo Qinggu. It was called the Xianyuan Qi sword case. It contained 81 streaks of sharp sword qi that he had been accumulating on a daily basis. It was fierce, and when it was first formed, its power was already extraordinary. As Han Yang refined and accumulated it daily, it would become stronger and stronger as time passed. After Han Yang obtained this sword case, he had never truly used it against an enemy. The sword qis that had been refined and accumulated were already very terrifying. If he released it all at once, the sword qis would cover the sky and the earth, causing the mountains and rivers to change color. Its offensive and destructive power was rare among the ritual implements of the Yuanying. Everyone could feel the fury in Zhou Yunsong's heart. However, he did not make a move at this time. Instead, with a slight thought, his body lit up with a gentle light. Outside of Zhou Yunsong's purple robe, the light condensed, and suddenly there was a robe that was half black and half white. The power of yin and yang intersected, adding to the returning Heaven Law realm, revealing a powerful and mysterious concept of power. This concept of power revealed the rotation of yin and yang, resisting the aura of all evil. It was not as straightforward and indestructible as the returning Heaven Law shield, but it was more resilient. As the black and white yin and yang rotated, it diverted the damage from the outside world, using softness to overcome hardness. This was one of the 2 ritual implements of the Yuanying ritual implements that Zhou Yunsong was bestowed by Yang Qing as the second-generation true disciple of the Nirvana Wonderland. It was called the Radiant Robe. Yang Qing had considered that Zhou Yunsong was outstanding in attack, but was not good at defense, so she had specially prepared it for him to protect. Yang Qing and Luo Qinggu were still Yuanying practitioners. If they wanted to refine a ritual implement of the Yuanying ritual implement with satisfactory quality and powerful power, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time and energy. It was the same situation for Yu Hongyan and Li Yuanfang. However, Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi were quite experienced in the path of refining, and they had already achieved the primordial spirit. With their help, the ritual implement that Yang Qing and the other 3 passed on to their own head disciple was not inferior to Tang Jun's pure Yang robe and Yang Tai's returning Heaven Law shield. Zhou Yunsong activated the Radiant Robe, and the powerful defensive power immediately filled the gap left by Tang Jun's departure. It was even stronger, and it stabilized the light ball that was on the verge of collapse under the bombardment of the spiritual qi storm. Tang Jun looked at the others and said in a deep voice, "The spiritual qi storm has made the space here extremely chaotic. If we take action later, if the space boundary is chaotic, we may be separated. At that time, we will reunite by following the mana mark." Everyone nodded. Yang Tai supported the returning Heaven Law Shield and the central mixed heaven sealing realm and said, "We have at least 10 breaths time." Tang Jun smiled and said, "10 breaths time is enough." Han Yang also smiled and said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." After saying that, he slapped his palm on the Xianyuan controlling Qi sword case. The lock on the top of the sword case suddenly opened, and a violent sword Qi gushed out like a fierce tiger coming out of the cage. The pale flame around Tang Jun also rolled up and fell on the light ball. Where the pale flame reached, the passage of time seemed to suddenly slow down. The talisman characters flowing on the light ball almost became still at this moment, and the spiritual Qi storm outside took the opportunity to rush in. But the moment the violent turbulence of spiritual Qi came into contact with the pale flame, it also suddenly became slow, as if it had been frozen. At this moment, the sharp sword Qi in Han Yang's Xianyuan controlling Qi sword case soared into the sky, dispersing the talisman characters and the turbulence of spiritual Qi on the light ball. Shan Xiang, who was outside the light ball, was the first to notice that something was wrong. He looked up in shock. Zhao Mingxiu and Yang Zhao, who were confronting each other, also turned their eyes to the light ball in surprise. They saw the surface of the light ball suddenly tremble violently, and a gap appeared on its own. Then, the violent sword Qi and pale flame gushed out. But to the surprise of the people in Taishu Temple, the light ball did not collapse because of the huge gap. It was still functioning normally, firmly blocking the spiritual Qi storm in other directions. And the sword Qi and flame that rushed out of the gap stirred the spiritual Qi storm in this direction, even more chaotic. Wan Zhengluan's pupils shrank sharply, because he found that it was not only him who was destroying the balance, but the other party who was destroying it even more. In this situation, the already unstable spiritual Qi storm became more and more violent, showing signs of further expansion. Its power and scope were both expanding, and the periphery of the storm kept expanding, trying to swallow him. Xianmen Tianzong's madman. Wan Zhengluan's expression changed slightly, and he was about to retreat, but the pale flame and the turbulence of the storm had already rolled into a ball and affected him. This time, even Shan Xiang's expression changed slightly. It's the talent power of Tang Jun's Emperor's body of blue flame. Tang Jun had traveled the world for a long time, and the power of his Emperor's body of blue flame was no longer a secret. But even so, Shan Xiang and the others did not expect that the pale flame would be so evil. The turbulence of the storm and ding of Shenzhou caused the spiritual Qi in the world to be completely chaotic, and it was very difficult to use it. If it was not for the fact that the supernatural powers were much stronger than the turbulence of the storm, then they could only passively defend, or else the supernatural powers and supernatural powers of a cultivator would most likely be disrupted by the spiritual Qi storm. But the pale flame that Tang Jun sent out was actually entangled with the turbulence of the storm, and it did not affect its own function at all. Being touched by the pale flame, Wan Zhengluan suddenly felt that everything around him was changing extremely quickly, and he could not keep up with it. It's not the other things that have become faster. It's me that has become slower. Wan Zhengluan was shocked. With this delay, he had already been swept up by the turbulence of the storm. What was even more terrifying was that under the effect of the pale flame, even the sharp sword Qi in Han Yang's Xianyuan Qi driving sword case was not affected by the turbulence of the spiritual Qi in the outside world. It was still sharp, and it slashed towards Wan Zhengluan, who seemed to have fallen into a daze. Wan Zhengluan's reaction, movement, and perception were all already slowing down. Once he was swept up by the turbulence of the storm, his supernatural powers and spiritual Qi became chaotic, and he could not even cast a supernatural power or spell. Fortunately, as the successor of Taishu Temple, he did not lack experience in facing enemies. When he retreated just now, he had already taken out his ritual implement. Being able to enter the desolate ancient sea of stars meant that he was valued by the Taishu Temple, and his protective ritual implement was naturally not bad. Wan Zhengluan took out an inkstone, which was also a yuanying ritual implement. Many thick black ink emerged from the inkstone, and it spread out in front of him. Although the spiritual power was discounted by the turbulence of the spiritual qi, the ink still formed a black cloud, and it blocked the deadly sword qi in front of Wan Zhengluan. However, the sword qi in Han Yang's Xianyuan qi driving sword case was extremely sharp. It was only slightly hindered, but it had already begun to cut open the black cloud, which was already not large in size, and it had already begun to slash towards Wan Zhengluan, who was unable to fend for himself. Shan Xiang's eyes flashed, and he appeared in front of Wan Zhengluan. His hands moved together to form a spell, and he chanted, "The wheel of time returns to normal, and the rules of chaos return to nature, and the rules of chaos obey the will of the heavens. This is the edict." The spell of Taishu Temple, the return of time, erased the abnormal changes of time in this part of the world caused by external forces. Under the effect of the majestic spell, Wan Zhengluan, who had been touched by the pale white flame, looked like a clay puppet. Suddenly, his eyes became lively again, and he hurriedly retreated, avoiding the sword qi's attack. But at this moment, a figure had already rushed out from the gap in the light ball, and along with the turbulence of the spiritual qi storm, he instantly appeared in front of Shan Xiang and Wan Zhengluan. It was Tang Jun. Tang Jun let out a long roar, and his whole body surged up, and the dark blue and purple flame lit up, instantly turning into a boundless blue sea of fire, as if the whole world was dyed blue and purple. It contained the concept of destruction, and it seemed to be even more brutal and ruthless than the turbulence of the spiritual qi. Shan Xiang's pupils shrank slightly, and he said, "Rumor has it that he is the only disciple under the master of Burning Sky Cliff, Xiao Yan, who has successfully cultivated the nether evil flame. It seems that it is true." The nether evil flame was a demon fire that could destroy heaven and earth. In terms of pure destructive power, it was second to none among the 7 great true fires. At this moment, Tang Jun was surrounded by the blue and purple demon fire, and he looked like a demon king from hell. Behind Tang Jun, a giant beast could be vaguely seen. It had the head of a dragon, the body of an elk, the tail of an ox, the hooves of a horse, and the scales of a fish. It was a qilin. But unlike the qilin formed from Zhu Yi's heavenly qilin technique that was dignified, virtuous, and dignified, the qilin formed from Tang Jun's magic energy was completely enveloped in the netherworld evil radiance, and it emitted a violent, ruthless, and overbearing feeling. The fire qilin seemed to be one with Tang Jun's body, and Tang Jun's body erupted with a blazing qi and blood like a volcano. He threw a punch at Wan Zhengluan, and the power of the sky collapse made even Shan Xiang's heart jump. Tang Jun cultivated the Heaven and Tao Sutra, and after refining a qilin horn that he had obtained by chance, he fused it with the power of the nether evil flame to create a supernatural martial art, the fire qilin's evil fist. The yuanying stage's inkstone did not have time to protect his body, and if this punch landed on Wan Zhengluan, his divine soul and physical body would immediately explode. Wan Zhengluan hurriedly used the Taishu Temple's infinite transformation technique, and his body turned between the real and the fake, trying to avoid Tang Jun's punch. Seeing this, Tang Jun laughed coldly, and glanced at Shan Xiang from the corner of his eyes. "It's better if he used this move, but it's a waste to use it on you." The pale flames in his eyes lit up again, but this time, it was not on Wan Zhengluan, but on Tang Jun himself. In an instant, Tang Jun's speed suddenly increased. Just as Wan Zhengluan's body was about to merge with the void, Tang Jun had already appeared in front of him. Chapter 996. Tang Jun rushed in front of Wan Zhengluan. Shan Xiang's expression changed slightly, his finger pointing lightly. Black and white vortexes appeared one after another, blocking between Tang Jun and Wan Zhengluan. "Let's talk, don't be in a hurry to make a move," Shan Xiang said in a deep voice. Tang Jun glanced at him and smiled coldly. "You didn't stop him before. Now you should stay here quietly. If you don't interfere, I'll tell you later. If you interfere, I'll beat you up too." Tang Jun looked at him and smiled coldly. Shan Xiang took a deep breath. Brother Wan just wanted to help you guys, who knew that his good intentions would cause trouble. Everything was just an accident. Heh. Tang Jun laughed lightly. Do you believe your own words? Shan Xiang's gaze became deep and serene. The responsibility of the enmity between our two sects isn't something the two of us can bear. Your sect's founder, the head of the Xian Gate, and your master and martial uncles might not be happy to see that scene. Tang Jun said coldly. Then you'll have to ask the scum behind you. Shan Xiang's brows furrowed tightly, his heart also becoming angry. I gave you a way out, but you don't want to step down. You still want to be so overbearing. Do you think this monastery is Purple Sky Path, Celerita's sword sect? Thinking up to here, the fierceness in his gaze gradually increased, looking coldly at Tang Jun. Good intentions don't get rewarded. Since that's the case, then you guys deal with the spiritual energy storm yourselves. While speaking, the yin-yang path mana of the void exploded out, crashing towards Tang Jun, wanting to knock Tang Jun back into the center of the storm where the light ball was. At the same time, his mana extended out, grabbing Wan Zhengluan, who was already wrapped up in the spiritual energy storm, trying to bring him out. Yang Zhao glanced at Zhao Mingxiu, and also went up to help. Zhao Mingxiu pursed her lips and finally let out a long sigh, also going up, but not against Tang Jun. But together with Shan Xiang they tried to drag Wan Zhengluan out of the spiritual energy storm. Tang Jun faced Shan Xiang and laughed coldly. Middle Yuanying, Taishu Temple's Middle Yuanying, ha, so what? The mana of Xianmen Tianzong cultivators can't be measured by the standard of the divine land, even if you're Taishu Temple's opponent. With a long roar, the pure yang robe on Tang Jun lit up with milky white flames, protecting him, blocking the streams of light that Yang Zhao used to cast the Supreme Nine Apertures Real God's Treasure technique. At the same time, the Xidagarba Pure Yang Mirror flew up, fighting against Yang Zhao's short sword-like Yuanying artifact. And Tang Jun's own violent fire Kailan's evil fist collided head-on with Shan Xiang's yin-yang chaotic hole, blowing up the black and white airflow vortexes one after another. Wan Zhengluan reappeared in Tang Jun's line of sight, grinning. A golden crown condensed from light appeared on his head. The light was as dazzling as the sun, like a small sun floating on top of Tang Jun's head. Rays of true sunfire divine light that looked like needles fell on Wan Zhengluan's head. Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, and Wan Zhengluan gasped at the same time, their pupils constricting suddenly. A golden elixir period cultivator has 3 Yuanying artifacts. Is this his own opportunity, or is it a reward from the sect? This is too extravagant. Shan Xiang suddenly put his palms together. A large amount of yin and yang spiritual energy gathered, turning into a waterfall, blocking the true sunfire, and then fell on Tang Jun like a raging dragon. With the help of Shan Xiang and Yang Zhao, Wan Zhengluan was finally able to catch his breath. Although he was swept up by the turbulent spiritual energy storm, and couldn't circulate his magic power smoothly, he still controlled the black inkstone, and smashed it toward Tang Jun's head. Tang Jun was not afraid. The pale white flame around his body combined with the turbulent spiritual energy storm, and behind him was the magic power of Yang Tai and the others, so he was temporarily not afraid of the disturbance of the turbulent spiritual energy storm, and could use his magic power freely. Facing the joint attack of Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, and Wan Zhengluan, the flame in Tang Jun's eyes became more and more vigorous. The true fire around his body scattered in the air, all turning into the pale white flame that flashed with green light, turning the surrounding heaven and earth into a gray and stagnant color. Wherever the flame reached, time seemed to stop, but in the next moment, it suddenly flowed again, passing by quickly. Shan Xiang and the others felt an old and desolate air shrouding them, causing their flesh, soul, and magic power to age rapidly, as if they were walking into the twilight years. Shan Xiang and the others each cast a spell to recall time, trying to remove the strange influence of Tang Jun's pale white flame. But under Tang Jun's control, within the area covered by the pale white sea of flames, the flow of time was suddenly fast and suddenly slow, changing unpredictably and difficult to grasp, causing Dan Xiang and the others to be completely overwhelmed. The intense changes that intersected between fast and slow caused the minds of everyone from the Void Temple to be dazed, and they were depressed and uncomfortable to the point of wanting to spit blood. Tang Jun cultivated the Tao Te Ching, and combined it with his own power of pale white flame. The divine power of pale yellow overturned. Under the effect of the spell, the attack of Shan Xiang and the others was instantly defeated, falling apart. Tang Jun himself was not in a good state. Under the effect of the spell, the flow of time in his body was also changing fast and slow, but after a long period of hard training, and the pale white flame was his own power, his adaptability was much better than the people of the Taishu temple. His feet stepped in a chain. Tang Jun was like a qilin surrounded by raging flames, trampling the void, killing his way to the front of Wan Zhongluan. A trace of anger flashed in Shan Xiang's eyes. He shouted angrily, "Quick!" Following his shout, a scroll of painting flew out from his body. The scroll unrolled, and a black and white splash ink painting of mountains and rivers appeared in front of Tang Jun, emitting a huge suction force, trying to suck Tang Jun in. Tang Jun laughed. His arms staggered up and down, like a fire qilin opening its huge mouth, and then his upper and lower teeth bit together, sandwiching the scroll in the middle. The violent Yuanying landscape painting poured down, exerting its power on Shan Xiang's Yuanying immortal treasure, the yin-yang landscape painting. The black and white light on the painting flickered together, resisting the burning of the Yuanying evil flame, and transparent streams of water also gushed out of the painting, transparent and clear like never before, as if it was the purest existence in the world. A faint fragrance wafted out of the water, revealing a mysterious aura of the mother of all creation. This was one of the 6 great true waters of heaven and earth, the true water of heaven. The true water of heaven, under the fusion of the 2 energies of yin and yang, resisted the violent Yuanying evil flame together. Seeing this, Tang Jun nodded slightly. Compared to the rumor that Shushan cultivators are 1 level higher, in Tang Jun's opinion, it was more appropriate to use it on the direct disciples of Taishu Temple. Although it could not be generalized, at least in the case of most people, Taishu cultivators are 1 level higher, was not an exaggeration. Not only in the outside world, but also within the celestial sect of wonders. Tang Jun was also regarded as one of the best among the 2nd-generation successor disciples of the celestial sect of wonders. He was one of the 3 strongest cultivators in the same realm. The reason was that he had once successfully recreated the legendary deeds of his master and aunts. At present, the news has not yet spread to the outside world, but all the disciples of the celestial sect of Xianmen already know that not long ago, when Tang Jun went out to gain experience, he once used the late Jiedan stage cultivation base, without the help of external forces, relying on his own magical power, crossed a whole realm and single-handedly killed a late Yuanying stage ancestor, who had achieved the heaven and earth law phase. And now, the feeling that Shan Xiang gave Tang Jun now was that he was stronger than the late-stage Yuanying patriarch, and the yin-yang landscape illustration refined by Taishu Temple was also stronger than ordinary Yuanying artifacts. But, so what? Tang Jun exerted force in his palms, and the violent power was like the teeth of a fierce demon, and together with the Yuanying evil flame, it was exerted on the yin-yang landscape illustration. No, Shan Xiang cried out and flew over. Countless yin-yang chaotic holes overlapped and covered Tang Jun. But Tang Jun's palms seemed to be lightly rubbing and pressing, and the yin-yang landscape illustration Tianyi True Water exploded. The black and white light were annihilated together, and the terrible power that could tear the sky apart instantly broke out, directly tearing this excellent quality Yuanying artifact into 2 pieces. In the midst of Shan Xiang's roar, the black and white yin-yang chaotic holes began to shake violently, simulating the power of nirvana of heaven and earth. The entire yin-yang chaotic hole and Tang Jun were blown apart. Tang Jun smiled coldly. I gave you face but you don't want it. Then today, I will peel off all the skin on your face. He put his palms together and gently patted down, and the void around him surged with countless turbulence. The next moment, 4 huge beams of light shot up to the sky and surrounded Tang Jun, directly piercing through Shan Xiang's yin-yang chaotic hole. Under Shan Xiang's incredulous gaze, the yin-yang chaotic hole that was pierced seemed to have lost its vitality and began to collapse on its own. It was not actively simulating the nirvana of heaven and earth, but passively dissipating, unable to set off any waves. The 4 beams of light gathered and squeezed Shan Xiang in the middle. He could only bitterly resist, but could not break out of the encirclement. Tang Jun said calmly, Have you mastered the yin-yang crushing heaven and earth grind, or the yin-yang infinite void? If not, I have no interest in continuing to waste time on you. These words made Shan Xiang so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Yin-yang crushing heaven and earth grind. There were only 4 cultivators below the primordial divinity realm who had mastered this kind of magical power, even among the geniuses of the Taishu Temple. This number even included Bai Shiqian, who had been beaten to a pulp. However, Shan Xiang soon discovered that Tang Jun did not mean to humiliate him. He was just calmly stating an objective fact. Under the pressure of the beams of light, Shan Xiang only felt that his spirit and body were in unbearable pain, and his magic was almost completely crushed. What made him even more depressed was that Tang Jun shook his head, and his attention was no longer on him, but on Wan Zhengluan again. In a flash, Tang Jun had already arrived in front of Wan Zhengluan. Damn it, you can't live. Zhao Mingxiu looked at Tang Jun and Wan Zhengluan, sighed, and made a sword sign with both hands. Quick! 2 sword lights, one red and one green, rose to the sky and met Tang Jun. Zhao Mingxiu looked determined. I don't agree with what senior brother Wan did, but we are from the same sect, and I can't watch him be killed by an outsider. Fellow cultivator Tang, please forgive me for offending you. As she spoke, suddenly, many sharp sword lights rushed out from the light ball in the center of the storm, intercepting Zhao Mingxiu's 2 sword lights. From the light ball came Han Yang's laughter. Tang Jun, I'm sorry, I took one from you. As you wish. As Tang Jun spoke, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's 9 breaths. 9 breaths had passed, and the storm, which had been restrained by his pale flame power and the light ball's defense, had become even more violent and had completely gone out of control. Everyone present, including Zhao Mingxiu, Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, and the others, were all sucked into the storm. Wan Zhengluan kept struggling, trying to escape from the turbulent storm, but he suddenly saw a fist that looked like a burning volcano filling his vision. Duh! With a roar, Wan Zhengluan's head was directly smashed by Tang Jun's fist. Chapter 997. Brother Wan. Seeing that Wan Zhengluan was killed by Tang Jun's fiery Kailan's evil fist, and that even his divine soul was devoured by the ferocious nether evil flame, Shan Xiang and the other 2 glared at Wan Zhengluan. The turbulence in the void became more violent and finally engulfed Tang Jun. The light ball in the center of the turbulence suddenly shattered and turned into specks of flowing light. However, all of this was within the calculations of Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others. The turbulence of the spiritual qi became more and more violent, and it was they who personally pushed it, causing the turbulence that should have slowly subsided to erupt. Although it was extremely violent, it was also shorter. The turbulence of the spiritual qi directly broke the void where everyone was, and everyone was sucked into the space gap. They were swept away by the turbulence of the spiritual qi, and disappeared. In the distance, 3 white clouds suddenly broke through the void. Their magical power was more powerful and exquisite than Shan Xiang's, but they were also blocked by the chaotic broken void and the turbulence in the void. They could only watch helplessly as Shan Xiang and the others, as well as Xianmen Tianzong and the others, were sucked into the space gap. However, because the void was broken, the turbulence of the spiritual qi had a channel to vent, and the damage to the people in the storm was greatly reduced. Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others immediately made up their minds to solve the crisis in front of them when they saw Wan Zhengluan's evil tricks. They took the risk to buy Tang Jun 10 breaths time, but it was only to let Wan Zhengluan, who deserved it, die. In the void, Zhao Mingxiu called back her 2 sword lights, one red and one green, to protect her body. However, she was also shaken by the turbulence of the spiritual qi. When she came to her senses, the scenery in front of her had completely changed, and she did not know where she was. It's senior brother Chun and the others. Zhao Mingxiu shook her head and sighed as she thought about the 3 white clouds that had finally arrived after being sucked into the spatial rift. But then she thought of Wan Zhengluan, who was killed by Tang Jun right in front of her eyes. For a moment, she had mixed feelings in her heart. She felt that Wan Zhengluan deserved it, but she was also angry at the unscrupulous overbearingness of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. After all, Wan Zhengluan was her fellow disciple. Even if she didn't agree with or even despised Wang Zhongluan's methods, she didn't want to see him die in the hands of an outsider. From Zhao Mingxiu's perspective, she naturally hoped that the elders of the sect would handle this matter. The three newcomers are even stronger than that Dan Xiang. It seems that even if there wasn't that sudden turbulent storm, all of you would have made a move later on? A somewhat lazy voice suddenly sounded in Zhao Mingxiu's ears, causing her to be terrified. Zhao Mingxiu turned her head abruptly, and saw a young man dressed in purple with a sword case on his back looking at her calmly from afar. It was Han Yang. Han Yang wore a careless smile on his face. Are you actually secretly blaming that Wang Zhongluan in your hearts? He acted blindly without rhyme or reason, and you've all lost your lives. Zhao Mingxiu straightened her expression and stared at Han Yang. I don't agree with Senior Brother Wan's methods. Regardless of what Senior Brother Chen and the rest think in the future, regardless of whether or not we will start a fight over Ding of Shenzhou, at least I have no intention of taking the initiative to make an enemy out of you. After all, you have just helped us to escape. Han Yang smiled. If you didn't take the initiative to provoke us, we wouldn't have made things difficult for the disciples of Taishu Temple. Even just now, I actually wasn't interested in fighting the four of you. However, I am more interested in your swordsmanship. I feel that it's not just the Grand Void Dual Pole Mystic Sword technique anymore. Zhao Mingxiu heard this and immediately frowned. She squinted her eyes and said, Are you looking down on the Dao techniques and supernatural powers of my Taishu Temple? Han Yang heard this and raised his eyebrows. He said calmly, That's not it. I'm not as omnipotent and powerful as my ancestral master. From the current point of view, leaving the main sect, just based on my personal opinion, the Void Temple is still an unreachable colossus. Experts come forth in large numbers. Your Void Temple's magical abilities are also mysterious and unfathomable. But the problem is that compared to my ancestral master, I am like a firefly in front of the sun and the moon. But the four of you are also no match for the primordial spirit cultivators of your sect. Zhao Mingxiu took a deep breath and made a sword technique with both hands. 2 rays of sword light, one red and one green, floated in front of her and headed straight for Han Yang. I am grateful that you saved us just now, but this matter involves the honor of the sect. I have been taught by the sect for many years, so I can't just ignore it. Zhao Mingxiu said in a low voice. I don't agree with what Senior Brother Wan did. He was killed by your fellow disciple. This dispute is not something that I can intervene in. It should be handled by the elders of the sect. You saved me just now. I will repay you generously in the future. But now, I would like to ask for your guidance, Brother Han. Her face was as calm as water. Han Yang, the second-generation successor disciple of the Celestial Sect 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 of the Celestial Sect. After seeing Tang Jun's attack just now, Zhao Mingxiu was sure that she was no match for him. But now that she was facing Han Yang, she had to fight. This was for the honor of her Taishu Temple. In terms of supernatural powers, the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong cannot be judged by the standard of the divine land, even if the opponent is Taishu Temple. Tang Jun's words were still ringing in Zhao Mingxiu's ears, making her feel deeply humiliated and frustrated. What made her heart bleed was that the past battles and the battle just now constantly proved the truth of these words. Tang Jun's words seemed to tear the last layer of the Taishu Temple's shameful cloth. He lightly said in their ears, with the same cultivation level, you can't fight with us. This made Zhao Mingxiu, who grew up learning martial arts in Taishu Temple, very depressed. If it were any other time, Zhao Mingxiu might have endured it for a while, and returned to the mountain to practice hard, so that she could compete with the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong in the future. But after the incident with Wang Zhongluan, Zhao Mingxiu had a strong desire to prove that the disciples of Taishu Temple had the strength and confidence to fight head-on. Even if they knew the odds of winning were not big, at least they had enough pride and courage. All the emotions in Zhao Mingxiu's eyes disappeared, becoming focused and sharp like the sword light. She thought of Han Yang, cupped her hands and bowed. Zhao Mingxiu, disciple of Taishu Temple, please enlighten me. Han Yang looked at Zhao Mingxiu from head to toe in surprise. The smile on his lips gradually disappeared, and his eyes became sharp for the first time. I gave you a helping hand just now, but I don't expect anything in return. You don't have to take it to heart. He still stood there casually, without drawing his sword, but his tone became serious. Disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, Han Yang, please enlighten me. Zhao Mingxiu made a sign with her hands, and two sword lights, one green and one red, directly broke the void and cut in front of Han Yang. The two Taoist swords were both Yuanying stage celestial devices, and they were in pairs. Taishu Temple was born out of the void Yin Yang Dao's Great Void Double Mystic Sword spell, which always used two swords, one Yin and one Yang, to cut the void and break the void. At the moment, Zhao Mingxiu's cultivation was still at the late Golden Elixir stage, but Taishu Temple gave her two Yuanying stage Taoist swords, which showed how much importance the sect attached to her. She had indeed shown an extremely exquisite cultivation of swordsmanship, and had already mastered the essence of the Great Void Double Mystic Sword spell. The two sword lights dragged two streams of air, one black and one white, which were separate and mutually reinforcing. The sword will and sword chi completely covered the void, as if they were everywhere. Zhao Mingxiu's red sky sword and green void sword were the best among the Yuanying stage celestial devices of Taishu Temple, and they were even more powerful when combined with her swordsmanship. The two sword lights were faintly discernible, and their direction was unpredictable. They appeared in the distance and disappeared in an instant, and the next time they appeared, they were already close to Han Yang's back. Seeing this, Han Yang nodded and said, "Sure enough, you are stronger than that Yang guy and that one guy. Even that Shan guy can't be careless when facing you." Zhao Mingxiu said calmly, "You have a sword and so do I. Let's fight." Hearing this, Han Yang looked calm and still didn't draw his sword, but his expression became more solemn. "My sword is called the Absolute Sword, which is supported by a Yuanying stage celestial device. It is the truest and most powerful state. But one of my spare Yuanying stage celestial devices was damaged before I entered the Sea of Stars, and it is still being repaired, so I couldn't bring it into the Sea of Stars. So please forgive me for offending you. I don't mean to humiliate you. On the contrary, although I don't think you can defeat me, you deserve my respect." After saying this, a red light flashed on the fingertip of his left hand, and he pointed at Zhao Mingxiu's two sword lights in the void. Then, thousands of black sword chi mixed with red light rushed out of his fingertip, and turned into an inescapable net. This was the first sword technique of Han Yang's Sword of Annihilation, the Annihilation Heavenly Net. This dense net crisscrossed in the void, and no matter which angle the flickering green and red sword lights appeared from, they were blocked by the black sword chi and violently collided with each other. Zhao Mingxiu guided the sword technique. The Great Void Dual Pole Mystic Sword technique was not only wonderful in its changes, but its power was equally fierce. The two swords attacked together and forcibly broke through Han Yang's sword chi net. The relatively feminine green void sword entangled Han Yang's sword chi net, while the relatively masculine red void sword broke through the siege and stabbed straight at Han Yang. However, Zhao Mingxiu was not happy at all. Instead, she was shocked. "I've been tricked." Just as the red void sword broke free from the net, its body paused for a moment, and it did not have time to speed up. Han Yang suddenly stretched out his right hand. Zhao Mingxiu's reaction was not slow either. She wanted to control the red void sword to retreat, but it was too late. Han Yang's right hand gently turned, and was already holding the red void sword's hilt. A scene that shocked Zhao Mingxiu happened. Small but large black light talisman patterns appeared on Han Yang's right hand like a stream of water. Then all of them surged onto the surface of the red void sword, and continued to spread until the red void sword, including the hilt, was completely covered. The red void sword trembled violently, and kept emitting angry cries as if it had emotions. However, it could not stop all of this from happening. It could only watch helplessly as the black light talisman patterns crawled all over the sword like ants. The next moment, all the black light talisman patterns connected and fused together, suddenly solidifying. The red void sword, which was originally shining with flames and had a blade that was like a pool of autumn water, had completely turned into a jet black longsword. Chapter 998. The surface of the longsword in Han Yang's hand cracked faintly, and the cracks became more and more obvious. A blood-red light flashed from within, like a blood-red river. Under the thick black fog, the sword's edge could not be seen clearly, and only the faint flashes of red light could be seen. Zhao Mingxiu felt that the connection between her and the Scarlet Sky Sword had been completely severed, and the sword intent and sword chi contained in the Scarlet Sky Sword had also disappeared. All that was left in front of her was a completely different and murderous black sword. Han Yang's expression was calm. He held the long sword that was shining with a black light, and with a slanted slash, he knocked the green void sword that was still in midair away. Zhao Mingxiu caught the dimmed green void sword, bit her lips, and stared at the black longsword in Han Yang's hand. She could feel that Han Yang did not use his full strength, and even suppressed the power of the absolute sword. Otherwise, the green void sword might have been broken in one strike. Not a bad sword. Han Yang looked at the black long sword that was still trembling slightly in his hand. This trembling was not caused by the collision with the green void sword, but the Scarlet Sky Sword was still resisting the control of the absolute sword. However, this trembling was getting weaker and soon disappeared. However, Han Yang had removed the restriction on the absolute sword. The black light dissipated and returned to his right hand like a tide. The Scarlet Sky Sword saw the light of day again. Before it could cause trouble, Han Yang threw the Scarlet Sky Sword back in front of Zhao Mingxiu. Zhao Mingxiu did not take the opportunity to launch another attack. Instead, she put away the Scarlet Sky Sword with a complicated expression. Sorry for the offense. Han Yang cupped his hands at her and said silently, Fellow Zhao, thank you for letting me win. Zhao Mingxiu closed her eyes and put away the Scarlet Sky Sword and the Green Void Sword. After a while, she said bitterly, My skills are not as good as yours. Fellow Han's cultivation. It was true that the Absolute Sword was stronger than her Scarlet Sky Sword and the Green Void Sword, but Han Yang had grabbed the Scarlet Sky Sword with his bare hands. This was enough to show the difference in their cultivation. Han Yang smiled and looked at Zhao Mingxiu with interest. Fellow Zhao is too humble. However, after fighting with you just now, I am certain of one thing. Your Taishu Temple's swordsmanship has indeed incorporated some of the mysteries of the immortal sword Qi of Shushan. Years ago, after my ancestor defeated the Shushan sword sect and sealed the mountain, your sect's grand elder, Lord Yu Yuan, went to Shushan. Although he only stayed for a short while before leaving, looking back now, he did gain something. Zhao Mingxiu calmly nodded her head and did not deny it. Even though the Void Temple did not proactively publicize this matter, it was not something that had to be kept a secret. She did not mind the outside world knowing about it. Han Yang smiled and shook his head. The Taishu Dao is indeed extraordinary. Shu Mountain's one sword gave birth to tens of thousands of swords. They concealed the truth and spread their sword intent across the world to nourish their own immortal heaven sword. Sword sects that carried the sword intent of Shu Mountain were innately castrated from reaching the top. No matter how many geniuses they produced, it was all in vain. At a certain height, the harder they tried to break through, the more they contributed to the immortal heaven sword unless they destroyed their own foundation and started from scratch. The Taishu Temple, on the other hand, incorporated the heavenly immortal sword Qi into their own cultivation system. Before the birth of the heavenly virtue scripture, the Great Way of Taishu was indeed the best scripture in the divine land. There was no need for him to integrate everything. He just had to choose what he needed from it, and bring his sword Dao to the next level. Although Han Yang was still in the golden elixir period, he already had some insight in swordsmanship. Naturally, he could see that Zhao Mingxiu was limited by her cultivation. She only had a superficial understanding of the swordsmanship of Taishu Temple. Taishu Temple must have experts with a higher understanding of swordsmanship. Zhao Mingxiu looked at Han Yang's right hand. Did you use a Dharma ability, or is it because your sword doesn't have a real form? Han Yang's gaze became calm again. The arrogance and sharpness disappeared, and a lazy smile appeared on his face. My sword, the absolute sword, doesn't have a real form usually. However, as long as I come into contact with something, it can turn into the form of the absolute sword. Actually, anything will do, regardless of size or shape. However, I'm ashamed to say that I haven't reached the state where I can turn all things into swords. Therefore, it's best to have something that looks like a sword as a form. The spirit chi storm in the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou gradually calmed down. The scenery returned to normal. Mountains, rivers, grass, and trees reappeared. Han Yang reached out his hand. A tree branch broke off from a distant tree and flew over to his right hand. An ordinary tree branch could be broken by an ordinary person's hands. However, a black light flashed on Han Yang's right hand. Dense black runes spread to the surface of the tree branch and wrapped it up. The next moment, the tree branch's shape didn't change. However, the surface of the tree flickered with black light. Tiny cracks appeared on the tree branch, and a ferocious bloody light flowed through the cracks. A shocking murderous aura surged and shattered the surrounding void. An ordinary and fragile tree branch turned into an extremely powerful Yuanying period magic weapon in Han Yang's hand. However, Zhao Mingxiu could feel that the absolute sword, in Han Yang's hand, was terrifying. However, it couldn't be compared to when it corroded the Scarlet Sky Sword. Han Yang turned the Scarlet Sky Sword into the Absolute Sword. Its power was almost the combination of the Absolute Sword, and the Scarlet Sky Sword. Although Zhao Mingxiu couldn't feel the existence of the Scarlet Sky Sword, the powerful waves of power were obviously much stronger than before. The Absolute Sword, which used the Scarlet Sky Sword as its body, could be said to have surpassed almost all Yuanying period magic weapons in terms of pure lethality and destructive power. It had surpassed the limits of Yuanying period magic weapons. No wonder you said that by using a Yuanying period sword as a body, your ominous sword is in its true and strongest state, Zhao Mingxiu muttered to herself. She stared at the tree branch in Han Yang's hand that had completely changed. Suddenly she asked, "This sword of yours was refined using Hua Luo's body as the raw material?" Upon hearing this, Han Yang dispersed the sword light of the Absolute Sword, and the tree branch in his hand returned to its original state. He gently threw it aside, looked at Zhao Mingxiu, and said with a smile, "The direct disciple of the Taishi realm is indeed experienced and knowledgeable. Not bad, I killed a Demon King realm body-seizing demon." Hua Luo was an extremely rare demon race, also known as a body-seizing demon. When it was born, it had a fixed body, but as it grew older, its body would lose its fixed shape, and its appearance would become like a gray shadow. Its innate magical ability was to attach itself to other demons, or even humans, and control their bodies. It was not soul-seizing, but body-eroding. Hua Luo, who had attained the indestructible demon soul realm, could not only erode tangible objects, but also the primordial spirit and indestructible demon soul. After possession, Hua Luo could not activate the magical abilities of the possessed, nor could he read the memories or thoughts of the possessed. However, he could control the movement of the possessed body, and could use the demonic energy or spiritual energy to perform other magical abilities of Hua Luo's own. The success of the possession depended on the strength of the two parties. However, generally speaking, as long as the other party's strength was slightly lower than Hua Luo's, there was a high chance that the possession would succeed. In the vast land of infinite wilderness, the Hua Luo had caused quite a stir because of this powerful magical ability. However, it was also because of this magical ability that, like the Blood River sect and the Tao of puppets of the human race, Hua Luo was rather hated. In the entire heaven primordial world, he was constantly hunted down. Thus, until now, Hua Luo was almost extinct, and it was rare to see one. For example, the Hua Ho that Han Yang had killed had reached the Demon King realm, which was even rarer than the feathers of a phoenix and the horns of a qilin. Han Yang's ominous sword used the remains of this Hua Luo king's body, demonic soul, and demonic infant, as well as the invisible divine metal as the main material. Luo Qinggu had asked Xiao Yin to help with the refinement, and had also obtained some Qiongqi essence blood from Shi Tianhao. She had refined it together with the Blood River True Water. The Qiongqi clan's magical ability was to form a torrential black sewage. Its effects were similar to the Blood River True Water, and it could pollute the opponent's dermic powers, and even seize control of the opponent's magical abilities and treasures. With the fusion of various materials, Luo Qinggu and Han Yang had even tried to incorporate a trace of the heaven-punishing sword Qi's unparalleled ferocious sword will. They had almost destroyed all the materials, and in the end, they had only managed to complete this sword after much danger. Even though Han Yang had only used a tree branch as a vessel, the ominous sword was a top-notch existence among the Yuanying realm Dharma weapons, surpassing Zhao Mingxiu's Scarlet Sky and Green Void swords. When he had used the Scarlet Sky sword as a vessel, it had become even more ferocious and domineering. Han Yang suddenly asked with interest, "When the three white clouds appeared, you mentioned senior martial brother Qin. Were you referring to Qin Xingyu?" Without waiting for Zhao Mingxiu to answer, he smiled and said leisurely, "Tisk tsk, now I really feel that the guy with the surname Wan is very annoying. It would be great if he could wait for Qin Xingyu and the other two." Zhao Mingxiu opened her mouth, and for a moment, she didn't know how to reply. She wanted to scold Han Yang for being so arrogant, but when she thought about the fight just now, she actually felt a vague sense of trust in him, which made her feel extremely conflicted. As they were talking, the two of them felt a tremor under their feet. The inner world of Ding of Shenzhou was slightly turbulent again, and the earth shook and the mountains shook. What's going on? Han Yang and Zhao Mingxiu were both shocked. At this moment, outside Ding of Shenzhou, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger stretched out a claw, while Shoichi Daishin stretched out a hand and grabbed the edge of Ding of Shenzhou at the same time. The yin and yang life and death formation was above the doppelganger of the god of war, standing next to the Brontosaurus doppelganger, looking at Shoichi Daishin with his hands behind his back. Shi Tianhao and Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger were also standing behind Lin Feng, and Xianlin Taoist was also standing next to Shoichi Daishin. The two sides were on the verge of a fight. Lin Feng's doppelganger of the god of war tilted his head slightly. Shi Tianhao nodded and immediately jumped into Ding of Shenzhou. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist's eyes flashed at the same time, and the Dharma power of Taishu Temple also leaked out. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and the doppelganger of the god of war stared at them expressionlessly. Slowly, the yin and yang life and death formation in the void began to operate. Next to Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger, the figure of Tsangtian Dao Jian also appeared. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist did not move after all. Their eyes fell on the lonely star sea gate in the starry sky on the other side. The star sea gate appeared and disappeared, drifting with the flow of the star sea spiritual qi. Gradually, it seemed to go far away. Slowly, Shoichi Daishin said, "Master of the celestial sect, can you part with it?" Chapter 999. Shoichi Daishin had one hand on the edge of Ding of Shenzhou, but his eyes were looking in the direction of the Gate of Star Ocean. Hearing his question, Lin Feng raised his eyebrows slightly and asked indifferently, "Shoichi Daishin, what is your intention?" Shoichi Daishin said slowly, "In your hands, a Gate of Star Ocean is just a fixed passage to the Sea of Stars. Although it is also of extraordinary value, in fact, it can play a more important role for the Divine Land." Lin Feng's expression did not change. "Shoichi Daishin, do you mean that the Haotian mirror can use a Gate of Star Ocean to locate the other 5 gates?" Shoichi Daishin answered, "More than 50% sure." Lin Feng nodded. 50% sure? That's not low. Hearing this, Shoichi Daishin waved at the Gate of Star Ocean that was floating in the distant starry sky. Unexpectedly, on the other side of the gate, there was a sudden surge of mana, which fixed the Gate of Star Ocean in place, making it impossible for Shoichi Daishin to collect it. Seeing this, Xianlin Taoist frowned slightly. Shoichi Daishin also looked at Lin Feng. "Your sect is far-sighted, and I cannot compare. Thank you in advance." Lin Feng's expression was as usual, and his tone was indifferent. "Although I have never come into contact with it, I should be able to get along well with the Haotian mirror." Hearing this, Shoichi Daishin's pair of snow-white long eyebrows trembled slightly, and he stared at Lin Feng. "So the master of the Gate of Star Ocean is making fun of me?" Lin Feng said indifferently, "Why do you say that, fellow Taoist? If you really want to say something, I should be the one asking Shoichi Daishin to stop making fun of me." Shoichi Daishin's expression was calm. His fingers on the edge of the Ding of Shenzhou caressed the body of the cauldron. "If that's the case, there's nothing else we can discuss. Lin Feng smiled. What did Shoichi Daishin want to talk about? I ceded the gate of Xinghai to you, but you won't interfere with Ding of Shenzhou? Haha, not necessarily. Although I don't have a deep understanding of your sect, I still know some of the most basic things. Slowly, Shoichi Daishin shook his head. Of course not. On the side, Xianlin Taoist said calmly, Ding of Shenzhou is of great importance and has far-reaching implications. My temple will not ignore it. However, if the master of the Gate of Star Ocean is willing to give up the Gate of Xinghai for the sake of the public, then the matter of Ding of Shenzhou can be discussed again. A magic treasure of creation cannot be divided into two, so naturally, it cannot be cut. Therefore, you can find a medium-class world and temporarily place it in a place that does not belong to Xianmen Tianzong. My temple will not bring it back to White Cloud Mountain, and both sides will look after it together. Otherwise, we can set a time limit and take turns to look after it. Lin Feng had a faint smile on his face. Oh, is this the plan of your sect? Shoichi Daishin said slowly. Ding of Shenzhou is the Ding of Shenzhou of the Divine Land. This is also the wish of Xia Huang in the past. Lin Feng chuckled. In the same way, the Haotian mirror is also the Haotian mirror of the Divine Land. Can it be dealt with in the same way? Hearing this, Shoichi Daishin's expression was as usual, but Xianlin Taoist frowned slightly. Lin Feng looked at Xianlin Taoist calmly. The Haotian mirror is different from the Supreme Yin-Yang mirror. Although I am ignorant, I still know about this matter. Xianlin Taoist's brows relaxed, and his expression became calm again. The Xiantian seal and the Tsangtian Daojian were both in Lin Feng's hands. The situation of the Xiantian seal was still unknown, but the Tsangtian Daojian had clearly expressed its submission. These two Mahayana treasures had existed since the ancient times. Perhaps they were not clear about some secrets back then, but they naturally knew about some things that were not secrets in the ancient times in detail. Especially in the last years of the ancient times, the information that the higher-ups of the heavenly gates had grasped was quite extensive. Shoichi Daishin shook his head. In that case, there's really nothing to talk about. Lin Feng looked at him, and his smile gradually disappeared. He said indifferently, Shoichi Daishin, there's nothing to talk about from the beginning. The Gate of Star Ocean belongs to me. The battle for Ding of Shenzhou will be based on our own abilities. It's that simple. Lin Feng said indifferently. What makes you feel that your esteemed sect can use your status as the ruler to coordinate and distribute their ownership? What makes you think that you can use Ding of Shenzhou, which doesn't belong to you, to exchange for the Gate of Star Ocean from me? Shoichi Daishin looked straight into Lin Feng's eyes. Lin Feng looked back at him calmly and said lightly, I know that in your sect's internal disagreement, whether it's you or Xianlin Taoist, you all regard the Taishu Temple as the dominator of the Divine Land. Considering things from this position, it's no wonder that you've come up with such an idea. However, first of all, not everyone in your sect thinks the same as you too, and the overall policy of your sect doesn't seem to be the same. Second, Lin Feng shook his head gently. With the current Divine Land, even if everyone in your sect thinks the same as you can't be the dominator of China. As soon as he said this, Shoichi Daishin was silent, and Xianlin Taoist's pupils suddenly shrank. Lin Feng's tone was calm, as if he was talking about something that couldn't be more ordinary, something that everyone knew and there was no doubt about. After a long time, Xianlin Taoist's eyes became calm again. Dominator? It's not your turn. Lin Feng said calmly, so everyone will rely on their own ability. Some people act high and mighty, but it only makes others laugh. Xianlin Taoist shook his head slowly. Master Tai and the Temple Master and the others should really regret it. Lin Feng looked at him indifferently. I've always admired Master Tai and the others. If they really are as you say, then I'll look down on them. Since they have the courage to treat all living beings in the world as chess pieces, naturally, there should be a day when a chess piece jumps out of the chessboard and becomes a chess player like themselves. Yearning for the joy and harvest brought by success should also have the calmness and responsibility to bear failure, and the calmness and resourcefulness to make decisions when things go beyond one's expectations. if you keep wallowing in the emotions of failure, annoyance, shame, and regret. Lin Feng let out a light laugh, lightly saying, if that's the case, it's very easy for a chess player to degrade into a chess piece. Xianlin Taoist silently looked at Lin Feng. After a long while he slowly nodded. Master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders is right. I made a mistake before. In the sea of stars the stars were shining, and the stars rose and fell in the dark void of the universe. The two sides stood facing each other, and for a time they fell into silence. Shoichi Daishin suddenly flipped his palm, and a ball of light and shadow floated between him and Lin Feng. The face of Master Tai gradually appeared in the light and shadow. Master Tai closed his eyes, but looked at Lin Feng, and said in a gentle tone, any dispute between us now is not good for the overall situation of the Divine Land. I hope that Master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders can focus on the public interest. Ding of Shenzhou is indeed of great importance to the entire Divine Land. If it can become a public joint management, it will be the most beneficial to the forces of our human race. The Gate of the Sea of Stars was obtained by your own luck. It's really inconvenient for us to say too much about how to deal with it. But I think that the two of us can actually work together to find the other 5 gates of the Sea of Stars. This is a good thing for both sides and the Divine Land. Lin Feng looked at the Supreme One's supremacy, nodding his head after a while. Cooperating to search and try to obtain the other 5 gates of the Sea of Stars. This proposal is feasible. As for the specifics, after I come out of the Sea of Stars this time, I will specially discuss with your sect. As for Ding of Shenzhou, we will make a decision after we communicate with the origin spirit in the cauldron. The origin spirit of the creation magic treasure was not non-existent, but it was as grand as the sky, like an independent will of the world. It had never been obvious, and was almost in a state of being half awake, half asleep and half asleep. Whether it was Lin Feng or the Taishu Temple, if they wanted to collect the ownerless Ding of Shenzhou, they would need to communicate with the origin spirit in the cauldron. Of course, this kind of communication might not be like the communication of the spirit breeding, transformation, and Mahayana level magic treasures. It might be a verbal communication, or it might be a purely mental communication. Hearing this, Master Tai nodded. That's good. After saying this, the light shadow disappeared. Tao Lord Righteous One remained silent, but after Tao Lord Dowie's silhouette disappeared, a few silhouettes lit up in his sea of consciousness. They belonged to Tao Lord Dowie, Yin Nanlai, Tao Lord Qing Wan, and Tao Lord Xian Wan. Master Tai, Master Qingyi, and Master Xian Wan all remained silent. Yin Nanlai sighed softly. There is finally hope to recapture the Sea of Stars that was lost in the last years of the ancient times. Slowly, Shoichi Daishin nodded. Master Qingyi said calmly, all signs show that Tenryu Gen's recovery speed is faster than expected. Our original plan needs to be brought forward. We need an opportunity, Master Xianwan said. The king of the underworld is still hibernating, and there is no trace of him. Even if there is a possibility to recapture the Sea of Stars, the environment of the Sea of Stars is still not suitable. We can't control the situation, and neither can the demon race. The master of the Celestial Gate is still in a dilemma. The mysterious sea is the only suitable environment. Master Qingyi said, if we can lure Tenryu Gen out of the mysterious sea, it is also acceptable. However, he has finally endured humiliation for once in his life, and it is harder to change his mind once he has made up his mind. The big shots of the Taishu Temple were all silent. After a long time, Master Tai slowly said, act according to the original plan, and look for an opportunity. The others nodded. At the same time, Lin Feng was actually communicating with Wang Lin, who was next to him, through his divine sense. Little Lin, how is it? The appearance of the great devil's doppelganger was exactly the same as Wang Lin's. He replied calmly, it's just an old trick of a red face and a white face. It's simple and effective. It was a very simple but very practical technique in negotiations. First, throw out a condition that the other party would definitely not tolerate, and after lowering the other party's psychological expectations, put forward a relatively mild condition. This was much more likely to be accepted than throwing out a second condition directly. Lin Feng said lightly, It is indeed very simple, but the hidden message behind it is not simple at all, because this is a cooperation between Master Tai and Shoichi Daishin. In the process, Shoichi Daishin's face will be damaged, which is tantamount to suppressing the influence of the radicals in the Taishu temple. Wang Lin's eyes flashed. The projection of Master Tai's magical power was brought to the Sea of Stars by Shoichi Daishin. If Shoichi Daishin himself is not willing, this kind of thing will not happen at all. In other words, Lin Feng nodded slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The internal thinking of Taishu Temple has begun to unify and reach a consensus, and it may not be the idea of appeasement. Chapter 1000. Lin Feng's gaze was calm as he communicated with Wang Lin through his divine sense. Although most of the time, the people in Taishu Temple can speak with the same voice, the divergence in principles will ultimately result in invisible internal friction. And when this colossus truly reaches a consensus and unifies its thoughts, the power contained within it will be quite astonishing. Lin Feng faintly smiled. History has proven this many times. Wang Lin's expression was tranquil while the great demon clone's ferocious aura permeated the surroundings. The two sides formed a contradictory conflict, but also harmonious unity. Silently he said, "Master, disciple understands what you mean." Lin Feng closed his eyes slightly and nodded. He did not say anything else and looked at Shoichi Daishin instead. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist's expressions remained the same. Shoichi Daishin flicked his finger, and a white cloud-shaped magic power landed on Ding of Shenzhou. Lin Feng's God of War clone also flicked his finger, and a purple cloud flew out, touching Ding of Shenzhou as well. The huge and heavy cauldron trembled slightly. Immediately after, Ding of Shenzhou opened up again. Layers of spatial boundaries shifted and once again turned into a void world. This world flashed with rays of light, and vaguely formed a shadow of light. The scene in the shadow of light changed, and the scene that appeared was a magnificent scene. Wind and clouds surged between heaven and earth. Many experts fought intensely. There were human experts who shattered the earth with a stomp of their feet, and there were peerless great demons who tore the sky with a single hand. A human cultivator dominated between heaven and earth. His flesh and blood were earth-shattering and covered the 8 desolates. He was tall like a giant god, and was a martial arts expert of the Tao integration realm. He fiercely wrestled with a Tongtian demonic ape of the unification of the astral soul's realm. He did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. His 2 fists smashed down like giant hammers. Even the Tongtian demonic ape, who was known for its physical strength, could not gain the upper hand. Is that the giant spirit sky-blasting hammer? Lin Feng's eyes flickered slightly. This mighty spirit godlike human Tao expert of the Tao integration realm looked very much like an expert from the ancient mighty spirit sect. In ancient times, the giant spirit sect was also quite famous. Their martial Tao of the physical body could shatter the void, and they would not be at a disadvantage when fighting against a great demon. However, this orthodoxy's inheritance had been completely annihilated in the ancient times, and now it no longer existed. However, its martial arts legacy had left quite a reputation in the history of the Divine Land. Although Lin Feng had not personally seen the giant spirit sky rumbling hammer martial art, the general characteristics of this martial art were very clear in the rumors, so he could recognize it at a glance. Then, as the giant spirit sect powerhouse was fighting fiercely with the Tongtian demonic ape, the sky suddenly split open, and an even more powerful armored black dragon that had already begun to experience its first tribulation rushed out. Although it was a little rude to say this, compared to the Black Dragon King, Jieyu was really like a loach. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon King was fighting with a monk. Buddha's light shone all over his body, enveloping heaven and earth. It was like the pure land of ultimate bliss, an ancient Buddhist land. In the Buddha's light, the sky was filled with Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, and Didi chanting Buddhist scriptures together. However, the Black Dragon King was really fierce, and the Buddha's light world was on the verge of collapse as if it would shatter at any time. At this moment, the battle between the giant spirit sect martial arts powerhouse and the Tongtian demonic ape affected the Black Dragon King, causing the Black Dragon King's attack to pause. The monk immediately turned from defense to offense. He stretched out his palm and lifted heaven and earth with one palm, pulling the Black Dragon King into the pure land of ultimate bliss. When Lin Feng, Shoichi Daishin, Xianlin Taoist, and the others saw this scene, they all secretly cheered. What a Buddhist kingdom in a palm! This was one of the most powerful magical powers of Buddhism, the Buddhist kingdom in a palm. Throughout history, only Buddhist mighty figures who had mastered the 5 directions Rulai Sutra and had successfully gone through tribulations could use this peerless magical power. Although it was not as overbearing as the Vairocana palm, it still had its own mystery. In today's divine land, this magical power, like the Vairocana palm, had disappeared after the last war between the two realms. It was almost as if it had been lost. Although the Black Dragon King's physical strength was extremely strong, he was unable to break out of the Buddhist kingdom in a palm of the monk's pure land of ultimate bliss. Between heaven and earth, a monk could be seen holding a world in his hand, and in the world, a black dragon kept stirring heaven and earth. However, in order to continue trapping the Black Dragon King, the monk could not deal with other enemies. At this moment, a bright light suddenly flashed, immediately injuring the monk. The monk had no choice but to withdraw the Buddhist kingdom in a palm to protect himself first. When the Black Dragon King broke free, he immediately flew into a rage. On one hand, he began to chase after the monk, and on the other hand, he vented his anger on the giant spirit sect martial arts powerhouse. He directly clawed down. The giant spirit sect powerhouse raised his arms and used all his strength to resist this claw. But he was also scratched until his flesh and blood were dripping. When a Tao Integration Realm martial arts powerhouse bled, a drop of blood was like a small sun. It was so hot that it was difficult to get close, and it dried up all the moisture in the surroundings. The giant spirit sect powerhouse was scratched by the claw, and his flesh and blood flew everywhere. Suddenly, the surrounding world seemed to have fallen into a great furnace. Before he could react, the Tongtian demonic ape brazenly pounced over and wrapped its arms around the giant spirit sect powerhouse, hugging him tightly. The demonic ape smiled ferociously and tightened its arms. A power that was not any weaker than that of the giant spirit sect powerhouse at his peak suddenly erupted. A soul-stirring sound came from all over the human powerhouse's body. This sound was not the ordinary sound of bones breaking. Instead, it was like the sound of heaven and earth collapsing and stars shattering. It was not ear-piercing. Instead, it was extremely low and shocking. The giant spirit sect powerhouse resisted with all his might. However, he was injured and had lost the upper hand. At this moment, he was powerless to fight against the demonic ape behind him. He could only let out an unwilling roar. The Tao Integration Realm powerhouse roared, and all the surrounding spirit chi was destroyed. The wind and clouds surged. However, he was one step behind, and he kept falling behind. No matter how hard he tried, he could not turn the situation around. He could only watch helplessly as his body was crushed by the primordial demonic ape step by step. However, at this moment, the entire world seemed to shake. The Black Dragon King, who was chasing after the monk, and the heaven-reaching demonic ape, who was about to win, were stunned. Then their expressions changed, and they saw the surrounding world suddenly change. The heaven-reaching demonic ape immediately gave up on the giant spirit sect powerhouse and leaped up into the sky. Unfortunately, it was too late. The world was like a great furnace, completely locking him inside. The Black Dragon, who was even more powerful, suffered the same fate. The Black Dragon kept roaring and tried to break through the surrounding realms. However, it could only break its head and bleed. The scene in front of Lin Feng, Wang Lin, Shoichi Daishin, and Xianlin Taoist suddenly changed. The world in the light and shadow disappeared, leaving behind an extremely heavy cauldron. Looking inside from the mouth of the cauldron, one could see an armored black dragon and a heaven-reaching demonic ape struggling. They were being cooked by air waves that were like flames and floodwaters. Next to the cauldron stood a person with his palm on the cauldron. He was dressed in a black dragon robe and had a flat crown on his head. His facial features could not be seen clearly, but he exuded a majestic and powerful aura. It was obvious that the cauldron was cooking a great demon. Naturally, it was Xia Huang and Ding of Shenzhou. However, Lin Feng frowned slightly when he saw this scene. It was mainly because of Ding of Shenzhou. Xia Huang was injured, and his injuries were quite serious. Who caused it? It can't be Jihuang Xinyuan. Lin Feng turned to look at Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist. He saw that their expressions were indifferent, and there was no change in their eyes. Ever since the death of Jua Huang Xianshang and the death of Taishu Taoist and Gautama Buddha, the strongest human expert in the divine land was not the successor of the human emperor. Instead, it was the strongest expert in the history of Taishu Temple after Taishu Taoist, Wen Qiang. For a long period of time, it would not be an exaggeration to call Wen Qiang the strongest expert in divine origin world. Killing Jua Huang Xianshang had severely damaged the Haotian mirror. After that, to open the path to the Dead Sea, the Taishu Taoist was forced to use the Haotian mirror again. As a result, after he and Gautama Buddha left, the Haotian mirror could not be used anymore. In the years that followed, it was Wen Qiang who shouldered the divine land and intimidated the demons of infinite wasteland. Although being invincible in one-on-one battles did not mean that he was invincible in everything, there were human experts who died in the war between the two worlds after that, and there were changes in the position of the human emperor. But overall, in that era, the divine land still had a slight advantage over infinite wasteland. However, for some reason, Wen Qiang seemed to have suddenly fallen out with his sect. In the end, he left White Cloud Mountain and cultivated alone. He only appeared during the war between the two worlds. This situation was finally broken when Jihuang Xinyuan appeared out of nowhere. The balance of power between the two worlds was reversed. In the end, during the war between the two worlds, Jihuang Xinyuan swept through the divine land and arrived at White Cloud Mountain. Wen Qiang traversed millions of miles to return to his sect. He brought along the Haotian mirror, which had recovered a long time ago but had not fully recovered, to stand guard at White Cloud Mountain and fight fiercely against Jihuang Xinyuan. Although Wen Qiang paid the price with his life and the Haotian mirror grew weaker, in exchange, Jihuang Xinyuan was heavily injured. The injuries were so severe that Jihuang Xinyuan had to temporarily abdicate and cultivate in seclusion. He only reappeared many years later, during the last days of the ancient era. However, it was also during this war between the two worlds that many bizarre things happened. Firstly, Wen Qiang's corpse was nowhere to be seen, and it was doubtful whether he was dead or alive. Some of the things that happened during the Middle Era also seem to prove this point. There were many secrets that were difficult to verify now. Secondly, when Wen Qiang and Jihuang Xinyuan had exchanged pieces, Xia Huang died mysteriously and Ding of Shenzhou went missing. Lin Feng looked at Xia Huang's figure in the light in front of him, and his eyes narrowed slightly. If the historical records are correct, Xia Huang did not fight fiercely with Jihuang Xinyuan, nor was there any record of him being injured when fighting with other demons. Why did he suddenly get injured? Why do I feel that his injuries are vaguely familiar? As the light and shadow flickered, the view seemed to come from the void, but also seemed to come from the Divine Prefecture Cauldron. Emperor Xia was leading the Divine Prefecture Cauldron in pursuit of a divine spiritual monkey, who was in the first tribulations. The monkey was using the innate divine ability of divine agility to flee. But in the end, Xia Huang still managed to block the divine agility monkey, and was prepared to kill it. But just as Ding of Shenzhou trapped the divine agility monkey, a black light suddenly appeared and wrapped around Xia Huang. Chapter 1001. Although the scene was rather blurry, Lin Feng, Shoichi Daishin and the others could tell that the scene shown was most likely the battle between the two worlds where Xia Huang died. Looking at the environment back then, it was in Tianhuang mainland. In terms of time, the battle between Jihuang Xinyuan and Wen Qiang had already ended. Wen Qiang had died and disappeared while Jihuang Xinyuan had returned to Tianhuang mainland with severe injuries. The other experts of the human race had also recovered their lost land under the command of Xia Huang, and even launched a counterattack against Tianhuang mainland. The battle between the two worlds was already nearing its end. Although the experts of the human race had launched a counterattack against the demon race world, it was merely a pursuit battle. The divine land had also suffered heavy losses, and was unable to launch an actual attack against Tianhuang mainland. According to historical records, Xia Huang had died mysteriously during the pursuit battle that was nearing the end of the battle. The war had almost come to an end, but the Xia Emperor, one of the peak experts of the human race, had actually fallen. This truly left everyone dumbfounded, and it became a famous mystery of the primordial era that had yet to be solved. Because his corpse was nowhere to be seen, there was still some hope left for people back then. However, as time passed, they were ultimately disappointed again and again. Lin Feng looked at the light projection in front of him seriously. The light projection formed by Ding of Shenzhou was likely to reveal this ancient secret. For example, Lin Feng had never heard that Xia Huang was already severely injured at the end of the battle. At this moment, within the light, the Xia Emperor, who was preparing to use the Divine God Cauldron to suppress and kill the tribulation-level Divine Spirit Monkey, was suddenly swept up by a ray of black light. In the depths of the black light, there was a white haze of light that was full of vitality. However, the black light itself was lifeless, indicating the deepest and most extreme true intent of death. As soon as he saw this black light, Lin Feng's eyes flashed with understanding. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist, whose expressions did not change after witnessing Xia Huang's injury, shifted their gazes slightly, as though they were trying to verify the guesses they had for many years. They sighed in unison. If that's the case, it's a pity for Xia Huang. Amidst the intertwining black light of the true intents of life and death, a figure appeared. This was a middle-aged man with a handsome face. His sideburns were slightly stained with frost. The two diametrically opposed temperaments of generosity and kindness and coldness were perfectly unified on him. It was inconceivable, yet filled with a unique charm. What was even more noteworthy was that his eyes were pitch black. When he opened his eyes, there was nothing else in his eye sockets other than pure darkness. Although they had never met before, Lin Feng, Wang Lin, Shoichi Daishin, and Xianlin Taoist could naturally recognize this person. After Xia Huang, he was the successor of the human emperor, the capital emperor. However, the later generations were more used to calling him the king of the underworld. The high and mighty king of the underworld, who controlled reincarnation and determined the fate of life and death. Lin Feng saw this and shook his head slightly. The ruthless sovereign has always been regarded as the first human emperor to commit treason. I never expected that the king of the underworld was actually the first. During the reign of the human emperors, the succession of the throne was mostly due to the death of the previous human emperors in the war with the demon clan. Most human emperors did not have a good ending. The abdication of the human emperor was an exception. As for the last 3 generations of human emperors, it was a sad story. The king of the underworld was deposed and overthrown by the Taishu Temple, and the ancient emperor in conjunction with other forces in the divine land. After the ancient emperor was severely injured in the war between the two worlds, he was killed by the ruthless sovereign. In the end, the ruthless sovereign was deposed and killed by the entire divine land, which ended the rule of the human emperors. Before this, no one would have thought that Xia Huang did not actually die in the hands of the demon clan. Instead, he was killed by the king of the underworld, who was also an expert of the human clan. In the light and shadow, the king of the underworld held Xia Huang back while the supreme agility monkey and Ding of Shenzhou took the opportunity to retaliate and restrain Ding of Shenzhou. Lin Feng only needed 2 glances to know that the king of the underworld must have been planning this for a long time. He had been hiding his strength and biding his time to hide it from everyone. Even if Xia Huang had not been injured, he would not have been a match for the king of the underworld. Now that Xia Huang was seriously injured and could not activate Ding of Shenzhou to assist him in battle, he was even less of a match for the king of the underworld. In the end, Xia Huang was killed by the king of the underworld. Ding of Shenzhou fled far away, and the supreme agility monkey that Ding of Shenzhou and Ding of Shenzhou were also killed by the king of the underworld. As the light and shadow changed, Ding of Shenzhou returned to the Sea of Stars. After the king of the underworld occupied the Sea of Stars, he tried to search for Ding of Shenzhou but ultimately failed to find Ding of Shenzhou. The uniqueness of the Sea of Stars made it unlike the Spirit Ocean and the Ocean Rising Ocean, which could be completely controlled by a single person, and used the power of the entire world to suppress a single target. This allowed Ding of Shenzhou to escape the calamity. He hid in the depths of the Sea of Stars and slowly recuperated until today. The light and shadow ended there. However, Lin Feng and the others naturally knew what happened after Xia Huang's death. After the war between the two worlds, the king of the underworld, who had yet to reveal his true thoughts, appeared out of nowhere. He ascended to the position of supremacy and ruled over the world, becoming the new human emperor of the generation. In reality, there were many suspicious points about Xia Huang's death. As the king of the underworld ascended to the throne, his reputation gradually deteriorated. Later generation speculations about whether the king of the underworld was related to Xia Huang's death had never stopped. However, apart from the king of the underworld himself, no one knew the truth. Therefore, there was no way to verify it. Today, this mystery that had been hanging for a long time had finally been solved. However, Lin Feng's eyes were slightly closed and light flickered in his eyes. It's true that Xia Huang died in the hands of the king of the underworld, but his previous injuries were not caused by the king of the underworld. In the end, Xia Huang was actually taken advantage of by the king of the underworld, who had been watching in the dark when he was heavily injured. In that case, who was the one who injured him? As he pondered, Lin Feng looked at Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist. He saw that both of them had regained their composure. Both of them had only had suspicions about the truth behind Xia Huang's death. It was only today that they had verified their suspicions. However, they did not seem surprised that Xia Huang had been injured. It was obvious that they knew about it. Both of them were obviously hostile towards the king of the underworld. They were not interested in him, but they felt sorry for Xia Huang. This also matched the information that Lin Feng had obtained from Sangtian Dao Jian. Among the ancient emperors, Xia Huang had the most harmonious relationship with the Taishu Temple. Xia Huang's daughter's Dao partner was a direct descendant of the Taishu Temple. However, what happened next made Lin Feng feel very excited. Brontosaurus's clone was not as convenient as the divine god of war's clone when it came to communicating with the artifact, even if the Brontosaurus's clone had a higher cultivation base. After the light disappeared, Lin Feng's divine god of war and Shoichi Daishin sent their energy into Ding of Shenzhou at the same time. Logically speaking, his divine god of war's energy was not as strong as Shoichi Daishin's. However, the result was that Ding of Shenzhou was not friendly to his energy. Instead, it was faintly repelling Shoichi Daishin. Shoichi Daishin's expression was calm, as if he was not surprised. He sighed in his heart. If he used the Taishu Sage Hall and combined his strength with his Dharma treasure, he might be able to retrieve the Divine Prefecture Cauldron after a long time. After all, while the Divine Prefecture Cauldron was repelling him, it was not that strong. There was still room for negotiation. However, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone and the Divine God of War's clone were right in front of him. The yin and yang life and death formation was slowly rotating in the void above his head. Naturally, they could not watch him subdue Ding of Shenzhou. However, Shoichi Daishin and the others came in through a disposable artifact. The number of people who could enter and their cultivation base were limited. Therefore, Taoist Master Tai and the others could not come to help. Although the Haotian mirror could shine into the Sea of Stars, on the one hand, it was separated by the power of boundaries. On the other hand, it was now fighting with Lin Feng in the Sea of Stars. The situation was not under the control of the Taishu Temple. In particular, Lin Feng's gate of the Sea of Stars was far away. If the situation was really necessary, his deity could come to the Sea of Stars at any time. Therefore, even though Shoichi Daishin had a tough character, he had to give up the idea of using force. In this way, although his strength was much stronger than Lin Feng's Divine God of War's clone, he did not have the slightest advantage. In particular, Shoichi Daishin did not dare to go all out. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone was now staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. The little Kelowna world that Ding of Shenzhou had turned into was now motionless under the wrestling between Shoichi Daishin and Lin Feng. It was as heavy as the vast land of the Divine Land. However, rays of light kept flashing on the surface of the little Kelowna world, dazzling in the dark void of the Sea of Stars. Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin were wrestling. The two of them did not focus all their attention on each other. While they were competing, They were also paying attention to the vast, desolate, ancient starry sea of stars, in case a group of great demons suddenly appeared and surrounded them. Wang Lin's great demon clone and Xianlin Taoist stood at the side, watching each other. At the same time, they were also keeping watch for their elders, paying attention to the surrounding movements. The great sage and the other great demons had just retreated, but that did not mean that they would not regroup and make a comeback. Lin Feng's expression suddenly changed slightly. His mind was connected to the gate of the Sea of Stars. He felt that his gate of the Sea of Stars was vibrating in an unusual manner. It was clearly different from usual. Soon, the entire Sea of Stars began to tremble slightly. In the distance, specks of starlight gradually connected, and the originally dark void of the universe became extremely dazzling. Shoichi Daishin and the others naturally noticed the changes in the desolate ancient starry sea. Someone wants to open the star tomb. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist looked at each other. Although they had not personally witnessed the scene of the ancient human race experts occupying the Sea of Stars to open the star tomb, this did not stop them from identifying what was happening in front of them based on the records of their sections. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, when my gate of stars was sealed, there was another gate of stars. This time, there are 4 gates of stars working together. He stared at the dazzling light in the distance and thought to himself, 4 gates of stars. In other words, this is the sign of the opening of the star tomb? Frankly speaking, this change was somewhat out of Lin Feng's expectations. Because in his expectations, the great demons should have tried to seize the gate of stars in his hands, and thus gather 4 gates. Other than him, the other 4 gates were in the hands of the Enchantress, Golden Rock Great Sage, the Great Sage, and the Dragon Race. Today, when Tenryugen had successfully gone through the intermediate trial, the possibility of the other 3 great demons and the Dragon Race working together to open the star tomb was too low. Then is it the 6th gate of the Sea of Stars? Lin Feng frowned. Or does the Enchantress and the others have other ideas? Chapter 1002. Lin Feng looked at the dazzling starry sky in the distance and grinned. The Enchantress, the Golden Rock Great Sage, and the Great Sage, are they going to help Taishu Temple and me lure Tenryugen out of the Xian Sea? The Great Sage and the others might not know why Taishu Temple could enter the Xian Sea, and they might not know if other experts from Taishu Temple would come to help Shoichi Daishin. But at least Shoichi Daishin and Taishu Temple had appeared in front of them. And Lin Feng definitely had a star sea gate. If there were no accidents, Lin Feng's main body could enter the Xian Sea at any time. Even if there were disputes between the 2 sides, if Tenryugen left the Xian Sea and entered the Xian Sea before he recovered to his peak, Lin Feng and Taishu Temple would most likely join forces to deal with this unparalleled demon who had successfully gone through the Middle Tribulation. Of course, even if Lin Feng and Taishu Temple succeeded in killing Tenryugen, they would have to pay a huge price. This was undoubtedly something that the Enchantress and the other great demons would love to see. If Tenryugen didn't enter the Xian Sea, then opening the star graveyard would be beneficial to them. The large number of star remains in the star graveyard was undoubtedly a precious treasure for the demon race, and it would greatly increase their strength. Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin looked at each other. They both knew what was going on, but they remained silent and didn't say anything. Although Ding of Shenzhou had once again turned into a little Kelowna world, the 2 sides were still wrestling. The star graveyard was far from where they were, but it wasn't out of reach for Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin. The opening of the star graveyard wasn't something that could be accomplished overnight, and it was just a warm-up. To them, taking down Ding of Shenzhou before rushing to the star tomb was a good choice. After all, in order to open the star tomb, 4 star ocean gates were needed. The star remains in the star tomb were precious treasures to the monster race, but they were also useful to human cultivators. Taking down Ding of Shenzhou could also enhance his own strength. Although this treasure was superior to the other treasures in terms of its ability to refine pills and medicines, it could not hide the fact that it was still a creation-grade magic treasure. The power it contained was equally earth-shattering. Xianlin Taoist and Wang Lin's great devil avatar stared at each other. Wang Lin's expression was incomparably calm. Although they hadn't really fought, he could vaguely feel that the great devil avatar alone was probably not a match for Xianlin Taoist, especially when the great devil avatar had suffered some damage in the previous battle with the six-horned great sage. His odds of winning were even slimmer. Although Tsongtian Daojian was by his side, Xianlin Taoist must also have a magic treasure with him. Moreover, it was a magic treasure that perfectly matched the Taoist techniques of his Taishu temple, and could play a better role. However, Wang Lin wasn't worried. He could also use Lin Feng's Two Realms Void technique. If there was a need, he could exchange his real body and the mysterious sky ceiling flag. Even though his attainments are not as profound as his master Lin Feng's, and it may not be convenient to use the two-world void technique separated by the Sea of Stars and the Great Thousand Worlds, but taking 10,000 steps back, the Gate of Stars is on the other side. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to weaken the remaining forces in the Divine Land, Wang Lin's real body would have already charged into the Star Ocean with the mysterious sky ceiling flag. Compared to him, he should be more worried about Xianlin Taoist. The difference between having support and not having support was most obvious when the two sides were basically evenly matched. In reality, Xianlin Taoist was indeed in a bad mood. However, it wasn't because of Wang Lin in front of him, nor was it because Xianmen Tianzong could descend upon the desolate ancient Star Ocean at any time. What concerned Xianlin Taoist was that Shi Tianhao had entered Ding of Shenzhou at Lin Feng's behest before the two sides began to wrestle. Previously, within Ding of Shenzhou, the strongest expert in Xianmen Tianzong had been Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone, which had a good foundation. Now that Zhu Yi had completely refined it, its strength had become even more powerful, far beyond that of ordinary void return cultivators. However, the strongest expert from Taishu Temple who had entered Ding of Shenzhou was Kai Fengzhou, a member of the Grand Supreme Elders Association, and a Dao Integration Realm expert. However, now that Shi Tianhao had also entered, although Xianlin Taoist still had confidence in Kai Fengzhou, he had to admit that his ability to control the situation had plummeted, and he no longer had enough confidence in success. Shoichi Dashin was wrestling with Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone and God of War clone for some special reasons. Under such circumstances, if Kai Fengzhou and the others could first contact the primordial spirit of Ding of Shenzhou from the inside and make progress, then they could cooperate from the inside and the outside to gain the upper hand in the battle for Ding of Shenzhou, and even expand their advantage into victory. On the contrary, the same situation was happening on Xianmen Tianzong's side. Under the influence of Lin Feng and Shoichi Dashin, the light outside the little Kelowna world became more and more dazzling, and the connection between them and Ding of Shenzhou became more and more intimate. The realm outside the little Kelowna world suddenly shook, and some light and shadow images emerged from it. Lin Feng and Shoichi Dashin's eyes flickered at the same time. The images before them were not light and shadow images of the past, but what was happening in Ding of Shenzhou right now. Many figures appeared in one of the light and shadow images. All of them were dressed in white robes with patterns of white clouds embroidered on their lapels. This was the standard uniform of Taishu Temple. One of them was thin and had pale skin. He had an aquiline nose and thin lips. His expression was cold and indifferent, and there was a slight sign of weakness on his face. He was saying something. This person was Yang Zhao. Previously, he was drawn into the void crack, and it was not easy for him to escape. His luck was not bad, and he soon met his fellow disciples again. There were many Taishu Temple cultivators in front of him, and they seemed to be led by 3 people. The person in the middle had the highest level of cultivation. She was a late-stage Yuanying cultivator, who had achieved the Dharma form of heaven and earth. She was a woman, and she looked calm. Silently, she was listening to Yang Zhao's words. This woman looked to be in her 20s. The light in her eyes was calm and quiet. Strictly speaking, her appearance was not outstanding. At most, she was above average. She could not be compared to female cultivators of Taishu Temple like Yan Mingyue and Bai Shiqian. However, her temperament was elegant, and it left a deep impression on others. But there was a hint of indifference in her calm expression. On the right side of this woman stood a handsome young man. He was tall and slender. He was one of the outstanding young disciples of Taishu Temple, who had participated in the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly with Lin Daohan and Yan Mingyue in the past. He was Chen Xingyu. Similar to Zhou Yunsong, who had the burning yang body, Chen Xingyu's absolute yin body also had many dangers during the process of cultivation. Compared to Zhou Yunsong, who had to face the yin fire tribulation right after he reached core formation, Chen Xingyu's core formation was slightly more stable. But the next hurdle he had to face was even more dangerous. When a person with the absolute yin body cultivated, after he reached core formation, he had to face the yin fire tribulation in the early stage of golden elixir. When he successfully reached the middle stage of golden elixir, he would immediately face the yin wind tribulation. In other words, after Chen Xingyu reached core formation, if he wanted to continue to advance, he had to face the wind tribulation and the fire tribulation. If he succeeded, he would reach the late stage of golden elixir, which was perfect and without leaks. If he failed, he would directly die. For Chen Xingyu, who had the absolute yin body, both of these hurdles were dangerous. Facing the tribulation consecutively was even more difficult. Just like how Zhou Yunsong had stagnated in the late stage of foundation building for a long time, Chen Xingyu had also endured for a long time in the early stage of golden elixir. Finally, under the protection of his master, he was able to succeed by a narrow margin. Soon after, he faced the void thunder tribulation. The predicament he faced was the same as Zhou Yunsong's. The difficulty was higher than that of other cultivators. However, this person was indeed worthy of being a genius that Taishu Temple focused on cultivating. Now he had successfully reached nascent soul. Of course, on the path of cultivation, he would still face more risks and difficulties than other cultivators. Together with Zhou Yunsong, they could be said to be a pair of brothers in hardship. Brother 1 was killed by Tang Jun. After that, Brother Shan, Sister Zhao, and Xianmen Tianzong were all devoured by the void crack. Yang Zhao told them what happened. At that time, Chen Xingyu and the others had already arrived at the scene. They were just a little slower, so they knew what happened after that. Sister Mu, please tell us what we should do next. After Yang Zhao finished speaking, he cupped his hands in salute, and did not say another word. Chen Xingyu looked at Sister Mu and said silently, Senior Sister, Sister Zhao and Brother Shan are missing. Let's look for them first, then meet up with Marshal Granduncle Kai and decide what to do next. Sister Mu's name was Mu Xian. Among the younger disciples of Taishu Temple, who entered the desolate ancient sea of stars, she had the highest cultivation base. She said calmly, Let's look for people first. We should look for Junior Brother Shan and Sister Zhao, and also Xianmen Tianzong. To the left of Mu Xian, the person standing side by side with her, and Chen Xingyu was a tall young man. Like Chen Xingyu, he was also at the early nascent soul stage. However, unlike the gentle and refined Chen Xingyu, his temperament was much more unyielding, and he revealed an extremely strong aggressive nature. The young man's chiseled face showed dissatisfaction. He stared at Yang Zhao and said, You have lost all the people of our temple. Yang Zhao faced him and bowed. He did not refute. It was not only because the young man's cultivation base was higher than his, and his magical power was even higher than Shan Xiang, who was at the middle Yuanying stage. It was also because this young man, Guo Chaoyang, was a radical like him. He was also the most powerful leader among the younger generation of the radical faction. Although the internal factions of Taishu Temple had unified their thinking on some matters, the differences between the factions still existed. The cultivation and competition of successors were everywhere. Since Pang Jie was suppressed and Shi Tianyi was beheaded, there were almost no radical descendants of the same generation who could touch Lin Daohan's position. Even if it was just a hope to fight against Lin Daohan, there were almost no radical descendants. But among the next generation of disciples, there was someone who could stand up to Chen Xingyu. It was the tall young man who was standing beside Mu Xian and Chen Xingyu. In front of Guo Chaoyang, there wasn't a single lie in Yang Zhao's words. Everything that he had said was true to the truth. Guo Chaoyang looked at Yang Zhao and shook his head. You and Brother 1 don't like Xianmen Tianzong. That's nothing. I don't like them either. But what's the deal with biting the hand that fed them and stabbing them in the back? It's not honorable if you succeed. Now you've lost the people and the formation. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.